The following is brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Scott Norton, and you're listening to Keepin It Strong Style.
Yo, this is Rich Latta from One Nation Radio. This is brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network. We present to you the Ace of Podcasts, Keepin It Strong Style. Let's go. It's the Ace of Podcasts, Keepin It Strong Style. Covering New Japan, they ready to hold it down. Jeremy Donovan and the young boy Josh. Come and hit a job out in Barrio the Frost. From Tokyo Dome over to the G1. Social Suplex is the network where we can get it done. I'ma chill and let them have it, cause this is just an intro. Keeping the strong style, 6 stars from the get-go, boy. Yeah, from Tampa Bay to the Tokyo Dome, this is Keeping It Strong Style with your hosts, Jeremy Donovan and the young boy Joshua Smith. And thank you for listening.
Welcome to Keeping It Strong Style, the ace of podcasts on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. The young boy Joshua Smith here with special guest co-host Chris Samsa. On today's show, we'll review nights 11 through 13 of the G1 Climax 32 and cover all the latest news in the world of New Japan Pro Wrestling. You can support our show by subscribing and following the Social Suplex Podcast Network or Keeping It Strong Style on the podcast app of your choice and leaving a rating and review. You can also get all the podcasts over at socialsuplex.com. Check out our Pro Wrestling Tee store, prowrestlingtees.com/social suplex. That's where you can get your official Keeping It Strong Style t-shirt. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider making a one-time or monthly donation by visiting socialsuplex.com/donate and clicking on the donate button under the KISS logo. This week's episode is brought to you by the NJPW EXT, the only browser extension for NJPWworld.com with features like dark mode, improved translations and layouts, custom and shared playlists, synchronized viewing parties, and much, much more. It takes NJPW World to the next level. Visit njpwext.us today for details. And I am here on the air with my co-host, Chris Samsa, not Jeremy Donovan, who bailed on us for his wedding and for his marriage and his honeymoon. How dare he? Chris, how you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm good. I'm happy to be the second wheel with you, I think, for the first time. And, yeah, I mean, congratulations to Jeremy. My invitation must have gotten lost in the mail because I don't believe I received it. So I'll have to take that up with the post office. But, I mean, if anything was going to get me to Florida, it may have been Jeremy's wedding, but... You know, it's cool. I had to be home to set up, to do this, to be helpful. I had to watch all the G1, and I probably would have sent a gift though. So you're missing out, pal.
Hey, you were listening to the show last week. I told you we could send a donation, so I mean that's on you.
Yeah, that's a gift. My presence is also a gift here.
The only thing that can get you to Florida, not New Japan Strong in St. Petersburg, Jeremy's wedding, big draw.
Priorities are priorities, okay?
So someone made a joke and they were like, I guess Rocky's invitation got left in the mail. And I was like, you know what? I think if he sent an invitation, Rocky probably show up to this wedding.
He might. He's about the nicest dude on the planet. So, like, there's a chance. There's a definite chance that he would have just, like, shown up and been like, what's up?
The craziest thing for me was I've done it before, but like, man, there's nothing more nerve-wracking than reading this rundown. Like, I don't know how Jeremy does it every week. Obviously, I botched a couple times, but like, dang, that's a mouthful, a lot of words to read there.
You know, I've had some feedback about that. It's kind of a lot at the beginning, and listen, I love you guys, but I always hit that skip 2 minutes button right at the beginning of the podcast because, like, I know the spiel, and almost every time 2 minutes is exactly where you jump in and you're just like Jeremy's like, young boy, how you doing? And then all of a sudden, like, there you are.
You know, since he's not here, we can do whatever the fuck we want to do on this episode. I've told Jeremy, I'm like, let's try other like introductions instead of just like, young boy, how you doing?
Yeah, for those who don't know, Jeremy steers the ship. I mean, that seems pretty clear when you're listening to the audio too, but listen.
Yeah, Jeremy does everything. He does the rundown for these shows, the organization. He like finds all the news stories. He does all the editing, the soundboard. I just show up and talk. Like, this is the most involved I've been in years in this podcast.
And by most involved, he means he read the intro.
No, I also
he did. Yeah, okay. You sent me the rundown too, but
you know what? It takes a long time. Like, I have a new appreciation for what Jeremy does. I'm like, dang, this. Like, how does he find the time for this? This has been a crazy weekend, you know, with the wedding and like the rehearsal and everything, and like all these G1 nights. Like, I'm amazed that I even got to view all of this, but I'm glad I did, because probably the best run of shows during the entire G1 this year so far. So, you know, I'm glad you're here for this episode, because if it was just me, I'd be like probably forgetting most of this.
Yeah, well, I mean, the G1 is certainly heating up, and there's been some really good stuff, and I am excited to be here to talk about it and to fill the gap left by the wonderful Jeremy Donovan as he's on a honeymoon, I guess, somewhere.
He is on his miniature honeymoon.
The mini-moon.
They're local here in the area, but, you know, there's still orders not to bother the Don.
Of course, the Don.
The El Jefe. And then when he comes back, you know, things will resume. He'll be on the show next week. We will have special guest host Karen Peterson joining us for 5 nights of coverage, including the block finals or the quarterfinals, or I don't know how they want to.
Tuesday?
What is that?
Next Tuesday?
Yeah.
That's the last night of block, so you'll know who's going into the semis.
Into the semis, yeah. Right. So, yep. So that's going to be a big episode. She'll be here to help us and kind of bridge the gap as Jeremy reacclimates to the real world. And then I think in October, he's got a bigger trip planned. So
probably right around that Ryogoku show that got announced. So
I think he's taking all the donations that we've gotten over the past couple of years, and he's been saving it up, and he's going to blow all that on his honeymoon. So, you know.
What... Because you don't get any of that?
Yeah, he's going to steal it from me, basically, is what my understanding.
I thought you guys were friends.
No, but we do have... No, we are good friends. So, to move on here. So, today, I also, like, for the first time, uploaded the questions to the listeners via the, you know, internet. And, like, I don't know why, but we got more engagement than we ever do. I don't know if it's because people don't like Jeremy and they're glad that it's you and me, or if the algorithms are just messed up, because I don't know, I had like 50 up likes on it, or I think maybe because I used a photo. I'm not sure. Like, I'm not good at this internet thing, but one of the people that commented, 360 Entertainment, said, "Holy crap, this looks good." Now, this might be a bot. This might be someone who just saw the picture of Jonah versus Okada and Shingo and Ospreay, and just like, maybe they're not that acclimated and they don't realize it already happened, and they could go on to NJPW World and view it right now. But I'm going to believe that this was someone that found out that you and I were doing the show, and they said to themselves, "Holy crap, this looks good."
It looks good.
Yeah. So, also, I Am Castetter said, ... "You're not Jeremy," in the Brick Tamlin voice. So, yeah, so that is correct.
He is right, or they are right. We don't know gender.
Yeah, but to start things off, we had our first serious question as we go into our review of the several nights in the standings here with longtime friend and sometimes co-host Rich Latta, 32. He said, "How does it feel for the G1 to finally begin?"
My G1 never ends.
That's true. That's true.
In my world, the G1 is all the time. Unless it's Wrestle Kingdom season, it's G1 season. It's like a hard split right in the middle of the year.
Yeah. When I start thinking that way, though, I start having like an existential crisis, like about the podcast and about like my fandom, and like, this is never going to end, huh? It's just going on forever.
Isn't that why TV stations pay like huge money for pro wrestling? It's because it has no off season and it never ends and it can go on forever.
But I think he's referring to the fact that up until these recent string of shows, there were no truly top tier, you know, match of the year contender type classics, and there weren't any nights that were considered by the general consensus as like truly great. And I think that we're starting to get in that territory. So, you know, Rich kind of being a hater there, sounds like.
This weekend was good, so I can understand why. I understand the question. Certainly, it kind of feels like the G1 kind of restarted, right? Like we're starting to see some real things happen in the. I mean, truly, like we're in the middle of the tournament, but it also feels like we're closer to the end because there's so many like things happening, important things happening, big matches. People being eliminated, people pulling ahead, like the standings are starting to have some relevance, whereas before they were like everyone's 2-1, or like Jonah hasn't wrestled in 12 days. You know, it's like we're kind of into this. We've hit a groove where they went to Osaka. Osaka's, you know, a great landing spot for the G1 every year. So we it does feel more like G1 season after this past weekend.
Well, yeah, that's true. And when you mentioned like, yeah, we're at the halfway point, but kind of when I was looking over this today, I realized there is no competitor that has less than 3 matches to go. And in most cases, almost everybody has about just 2 matches left. So
except for Chase Owens, who's like done after tonight. Well, tomorrow morning.
There are a couple people with just 1 match left, but for the most part, you know, a lot of them are in that like 2 range. And so we're getting down to the nitty gritty because of how spread out the tournament itself is over the various nights. So that's kind of also a unique thing, because that definitely wouldn't have been the case in like a 2-man or, you know, a 20-man 2 block situation.
Should we pause here and talk about how have you felt about the scheduling and just how the layout of the tournament this year? I'm sure there's questions about it later, but this feels like a good moment to like kind of double click on that, just as we were talking about like Chase Owens is done tomorrow, but you know, Fale, Cobb, Lawler, Archer, like all these other guys all have 2 matches left before after Chase, like one wrestler's done with their tournament. Like, how do you feel about that?
Well, I definitely have issues with the layout of the tournament because of the way that it's kind of fed into, you know, the overall vibe of the nights and also match quality as a whole. It doesn't, you know, extend itself to serving that sort of like epic G1 classic nights the way we normally would get in the 2 block situation. But from like the sporting fan, you know, kind of Grand Prix aspect where it's a little more kayfabe, it does add a lot more intrigue. And now that we're at this point, if you've been following along, I mean, we've got this situation here with, and we're going to talk about them here in a second, Jonah and Okada, for instance, where, you know, Jonah just beat Okada. They both got 2 matches to go, and they're tied at 6. And it did essentially keep a lot of people alive. And so there's a lot more scenarios that are sort of at play, and that's kind of fun, you know? So there are things I like about it. There are things I don't like about it. Like, for instance, over the last week, I mean, certain big-time players, like, say, David Finlay, he's leading his block, but he didn't wrestle at all this past week, and so he's been iced a bit. Who knows what's going to happen when he jumps in, and maybe that fits the narrative. I don't know. I do think that it takes away from the overall urgency and also attention of a lot of fans where, like, you can easily follow the narratives that are going on in 2 blocks and night over night and kind of keep tabs and track of that. It's much harder to do that over the course of, you know, this larger field with 4 blocks. So, I mean, I definitely think there's good things about it. There's definitely bad things about it. My feeling is that in the future, if they want to do this again, they need to have nothing but top-tier elite level wrestlers. That would be the biggest thing that I feel like could improve this, as opposed to maybe having people in there that you're like, I don't know if, you know, people that you would think were like on the bubble, like a Yujiro, for instance. If you replace him with, like, say, Bryan Danielson, we'd be
that's a different look.
Completely, yeah, it's a totally different conversation.
Yeah, I think it does allow for like different jumping in points, which I think is nice. Like right now is a really good jumping in point because now we have 10 days left of this tournament, I think, something like that. 9-10 days, give or take, and we things have shaken out already, right? You've got guys like Yano, who's already out, Hanare's already out, Ishii's already out. Actually, a bunch of B block guys are already out. And then you've got the top that's still mostly compact, right? Like you've got, like you said, you've got Jonah and Okada sitting at the top of the A block, but you've got a bunch of dudes within one match. If you're looking at things kind of like how far behind guys are, and most of them have two matches left and they're down by one, and like it's the G1, right? Jonah and Okada, they can both lose another match somehow, right? I don't have their schedules in front of me, but like in theory, that's an option, right? So like this, I guess, is kind of the 2/3 point, and that's a good jumping in point. So if you're listening to this and you haven't been like paying attention, don't go back. Don't bother unless you want to see some, there's good matches and stuff. There's a lot to see, especially this past weekend in Osaka, but jump in. Just watch the show on Tuesday and Wednesday and you'll be all caught up and it'll be great.
Well, the one positive here is like normally at this point, nights 12, 11, 12, 13, those are usually the nights where the tournament is grinding and it's like really hard to keep up with what's going on. And there's a lot of low stakes things taking place. I mean, every year I kind of joke with Jeremy. I'm like, oh God, night 11 of the G1, but here it's a little different because of the nature of how it's laid out. Everything means more at this juncture of the tournament as opposed to how it would have been previously. So that's kind of nice there. But let's jump into the standings here, and we're going to talk about each competitor and then discuss the different matches that kind of go along with them. So starting off with the leader of the A block, who he has jumped the previous leader. It is Jonah sitting at the top with 6 points. He's got 2 more matches to go. On night 11, Jonah defeated Jeff Cobb 14 minutes and 15 seconds. And then on night 13, Jonah defeated, in a huge surprising upset, the Rainmaker Kazuchika Okada 21 minutes and 53 seconds. So we have a few questions here, but, what were your thoughts on these matches, Chris? And are you surprised to see Jonah here?
I'm not surprised to see Jonah here because I think Jonah is a talented guy, and he's someone that New Japan wants to believe in, and they want him to be a part of the plan going forward. So if you really look at it, Okada had to lose to someone at some point, and you want that to be a really meaningful moment. And I think they accomplished that by having Jonah take that win. And if you look at the rest of the block, the other guy that would have been really interesting would be someone like Tom Lawler, and that match is still to come. And there's no saying that Okada is not going to take an L here. So Jonah, though, on the other hand, like he's not someone that I think the fandom was super excited to see on the list of competitors when they announced the G1, but anyone who's been watching Strong probably had a good vibe that he was gonna have a good run here, and he's had a pretty good G1. The matches with Cobb and Okada have been excellent, and like kind of those are the guys in that block that you really want to show up and have a good match with. Right. When it really comes down to it, the rest of the block, I mean, it's the monster block, right? You don't have that much, I guess, work rate, right? You've got these guys that are monsters, and they've wrestled like that. I mean, the average match length in A block is like 4 minutes shorter than any of the other blocks. And that's a huge span when you're looking at, an average of, say, 16 minutes, give or take, which is pretty normal for a G1. If I go back in history, the B block, the C block, and the D block are all 16, 17 minutes. A block, 12-minute average. Some of these guys live in under a 10-minute match average, and that makes sense for these big, beefy dudes. And it's much more like a big heavyweight block, which is super fun. And Jonah, clearly, he's a heavyweight for sure. So he definitely kind of can leverage that and, kind of do some damage. So Jonah's been really cool to watch. I don't know where this is going. Is he going to win the block, or was that his moment?
He's positioned to.
Yeah, I know. So I'm for it. I mean, I've said from the beginning that anyone can win any block right now because the semis get in the way, right? So if you need to, book someone out, the semis can serve that purpose.
Well, when we did the preview, I mean, there was the entire question about, okay, Jay is likely to win his block and Okada's likely to win his block, but then they're facing off, against one another in the semifinals, and then potentially what happens with, the fall title defense, and then are they going to end up again at Wrestle Kingdom? And I mean, we've seen New Japan do trilogies like that in the past and even recently this year, so it's not unfathomable, but I don't think that's as creatively interesting. But when you throw in a monkey wrench like a Jonah or something like that, or probably a Tama Tonga, that kind of opens the door for other more interesting things to happen. I do agree with you here, though. I thought that both of these matches were really great, and considering the kind of G1 that Cobb and Okada had last year, and how favored they both were coming into this year's A block, the fact that Jonah beat them on back-to-back performances pretty convincingly too. Even if he doesn't win the block, that sets the stage for him to be a main player here. And I'll tell you, I've got friends and just different people that have been kind of low on Jonah, maybe not because of the work that they not people that were watching Strong, but because the way he was presented in NXT, and that's what a lot of more kind of modern casual fans have seen, or I shouldn't say casual, but Western fans have seen more of that work than anything else. And, they maybe didn't see these kind of performances, and they don't have this kind of perception of the type of talent or quality performer he is. And just watching these matches, I was like, holy fuck, this guy's better than I even knew he was. And I'm like, okay, this is for real, for real. Jonah can be a top guy in New Japan easily. He fits in like a glove.
Oh yeah, he can, or if nothing else, he can definitely have a good, solid run and establish himself, and just be a guy that they can always go back to, which I think is really valuable too. And that's kind of the Cobb lane. I think it has been recently, but it's very cool to bring someone in and give them that shine. And that I feel like is a step in the right direction when it comes to the G1, where finally somebody new, and part of it's just that in 2020, 2021, you couldn't get anyone new in. But
right.
Now that we can, it's good to see that we're leveraging it, right? And making something out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, can't speak more highly of these matches. I mean, Jonah and Jeff Cobb was the epitome of what we've wanted out of this monster block. Two giant behemoths going out there and just having an incredibly physical war. It was literally a kaiju battle, and could have gone either way, and Jonah picked up the win there. But last week I was looking at the math, and I thought it made sense for Jonah to beat Okada, but even watching it live, I still had that that thing in the back of my mind, LOL, Okada wins. And then right when Okada went to, and the whole match, Okada is still coming back and everything, and he's having these rallies, but they gave a lot to Jonah. And there was something where I'm watching it in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, okay, I see what's happening. Okada's looking for fresh rivals that he can have big matches with down the line, and he's doing everything in his power to make Jonah look like $1 million. And that's exactly what happened here. And the penultimate moment where he goes to the top, he goes for the John Woo double drop kick, and Jonah turns that into a powerbomb. Me, along with the Japanese audience, I was like, oh my god, he's going to win. And then he picks him up, gets him closer, and powerbombs him again, and you hear the crowd roar, and this has been a totally docile, quiet crowd. And then he goes to the top, and the people are like, oh! And then he freaking splashes him, and they counted the 1, 2, 3. This is the loudest I've heard, a quote unquote clap crowd during the entire pandemic era. My mind was blown.
The last 30 seconds of that match,
yeah,
there was no clap crowd. Like that was they were cheering. Like that was it. And it was cool. It was very cool to see. It was very cool that Jonah, out of anyone, got that reaction, because it was so surprising that this guy who like just showed up beat Okada, right? And like they knew, because in either the undercard tags or in Jonah's previous matches, they knew how he wins, right? Like they were attentive enough to know how he wins a match. So that was, and honestly, when a big dude like that goes up on the top rope, you're gonna hem and haw a little bit, you're gonna want to make some noise. And I'm glad they did. Of course I'm glad they did, because why not, right? But and that's a whole nother discussion, but it was it's so cool to be able to go into that and be like, that's right, that's what this feels like, because like that brings the audience in with it that's watching on TV, and when the audience in the building is with it. And it was a nice reminder of how important crowds are in pro wrestling and how much they can actually elevate a match. And if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's a great time. I watched it live. I'm glad I watched it unspoiled. I kept waiting. You wait for the turnaround, right? You just you sit there and you're waiting for, okay, Okada, this is a great moment. Maybe they made Jonah in a loss, but then he won, and like that last hand hit the mat, and I was like, oh, okay.
Well, when Okada went to the top, that was like quintessential Okada. Like, okay, I'm getting ready to turn things around. This is part of my like usual routine, and it was for naught. Charlton actually on the commentary sort of drew a similar, like, he painted the picture that this was similar to when Inoki got beat by Vader.
By Vader, right?
Wasn't quite the same thing, but like I could definitely see how, down the line, I mean, these guys are definitely similar contemporaries of that sort of, foil, and down the road, I think they're going to be able to have a lot of other great matches together. So Jonah's sitting at the top of the block. He's tied with Okada, 6 points. He's got 2 more matches. And most of the block behind those guys all have 4 points or, less. And so for any of them to win, they're going to need things to shake out in a very specific way when it comes to Jonah and Okada's remainder of their tournaments. We do have some questions here that we should get to. Intelligent_end1516, he said, after his performances against Cobb and Okada over the weekend, Jonah should be booked to win that block, right?
We kind of just went over that. Maybe, right? I mean, I would love to see somebody fresh go into the semis. And Jonah is probably the most likely candidate to be that. So maybe it's so hard for me to like mentally put someone past Okada.
Yeah.
In this block, like there's nobody at that level, but also do you really need to knock him out in the semis?
It comes down to the Jay White question,
Yeah.
Is Jay going to get past Tama Tonga, or is Tama Tonga going to upset him and solidify a spot for himself? And then depending on how you see that going is going to depend on how you really basically predict the A block. And for me, I have that same trouble. I still have trouble seeing anybody getting past Okada, but at this point, if Jonah and Okada end up tied, Jonah's going to be the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he also holds the tiebreaker over Jeff Cobb and everything like that. So it's a tough one.
And Jonah is wrestling on the last night as well as Okada. So it's the last night is Jonah versus Bad Luck Fale and Okada versus Archer. So I think the most likely scenario is that they both go into that tied. And if Jonah beats Fale, he goes through, right? Yeah.
Well, if Okada wins his next match and then Jonah loses his next match, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Then, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Then there could be a situation where, like, Jonah still wins his final match against Fale, and if Okada doesn't win, they're tied. But if Okada does win or whatever, then he passes him. So I'll leave that stuff up to you though, because you're better with the final scenarios down the stretch.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of my thing. My big board. Y'all can't see it, but it's here. By the time people listen to this, Jonah will have had his match with Archer. So,
right.
Because that's in less than 12 hours now. So, yeah, you'll know more than we do as you're listening to this.
That dude named Menace asked, where would you rank Jonah versus Okada? So he didn't give any context to this question. I'm assuming he means, I don't know, maybe he's asking for star rankings or ranked within the confines of this year's G1. I would definitely say it's a top tier match. Me personally, it was not my favorite match of the night. I thought it was fantastic, but like me personally, I liked Ishii and Chase Owens better from the same night.
Yeah, I think it may be the most important match of the tournament so far.
Yeah.
I mean, you could make a case for some of the David Finlay stuff too, but I'm sure we'll get there. But when it comes to beating a top tier talent, someone that you didn't expect to beat someone in the top tier, this is that moment. So I do think that means something.
Well, we talk about star-making performances, and that term gets thrown around pretty loosely. But, I mean, you could combine the reactions of every night and I love him, but every night Dave Finlay won a big match in this tournament, and they still wouldn't amount to the reaction Jonah got beating Okada. So, I mean, that would tell you something there.
I mean, I don't know that there's anyone else in the company that you can beat that
right.
would get that sort of reaction. Right. So, because at this point, I mean, who else? Naito, I guess. Right. But he's kind of building himself back up here. And besides that, I guess you've got White, right? Because he's the champ and he's pretty well protected. But other than that, if I'm scrolling down the list here, I mean, Ospreay's up there. Shingo has his moments, but I mean, when it comes to like real true top of the mountain,
right.
It's Okada. And if you beat Okada, then you're a little bit of a made man.
But just to I'm not like Jeremy. I haven't kept my grapple. Actually, the grapple app's down, but like I know Jeremy keeps a running tally of all the star ratings. So I'm not like him. I don't have everything categorized necessarily, but this one was really high up there. Definitely one of the best matches of the tournament so far. If I had to go star ratings, I'd probably go 4.5. Like, so that's telling you something. At Rainbow Slam Pig asked, do you have any thoughts on the logic of having Jonah lose to Yano early in the tournament and then beat Okada later? And before I give it to you, Chris, I'll just say it's the G1.
Yeah.
And it's Yano. That's the logic.
Well, the thing about Jonah and the selling point right now is that he hasn't been pinned or submitted. And that doesn't mean he hasn't lost, obviously. So but that does mean something. He lost by count out.
I hadn't even thought of that, to be honest.
Yeah. So, and that's, I think I'd have to go back and look at, strong results and stuff, but I'm sure Jonah hasn't taken the L in any
No, he hasn't.
Yeah.
Not in America yet. And I mean, if you think about it, it's similar booking to Moxley a few years ago. He got Yano'd. Well,
right.
This guy got Yano'd. Everyone gets Yano'd.
Right.
I mean, we've seen Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi and Tanahashi, all sorts of guys get Yano'd. Like, that's just what it is.
That's why he's there.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, what? Jonah's undefeated. Then you got a different story.
We should have known that when he beat him the first night that was like, oh, okay, that's a red flag. They're going to push this guy.
I mean, I kind of did. I said it among friends. I was like, that means something. That's more than just a balancing loss. Like, he's taking that loss because he's about to rattle off some wins. And he sure as hell did.
But not this friend. You didn't tell this friend. So.
We haven't talked. we had time on the books to talk right now. Here we are.
So moving on, we have Okada. We just discussed his most recent match. He only had one match this week against Jonah. So he's sitting at 6 points. He also has 2 more matches left to go. And I mean, the most interesting thing is like he was undefeated going into this match. He's taken the big loss, and it's sort of the question now is how is he going to rebound from this loss And are him and Jonah collectively going to put themselves in a position in the next few nights to leave the rest of the pack behind and kind of eliminate the rest of the field? Or are we going to see both of them maybe drop a loss between the next couple nights and maybe keep some of these guys alive, you know?
Yeah, the interesting thing is they both have Lance Archer coming up. So Jonah's got Lance Archer next tonight, and then Okada's got Archer on the last night. And so Archer could play a role in some sort of three-way tie or, you know, whatever it may be if Archer wins both of those matches. So that's an interesting wrinkle, right? Because Archer's an interesting guy right now too. He's still in the mix, right? Anybody at 4 in that block is still in the mix. So Fale, Archer, Cobb, Lawler.
Fale's actually eliminated because he only has
he's only got one match left. Yes, I see that now. I see that on my block
the Cobb,
table.
Archer, and Lawler are all alive.
Yeah, and still in, you know, totally in the mix. And that, I think Archer's the most likely to be alive still going into last night because he's got Okada on the last night. And, you know, because he's going to be booked strong considering where he comes from right now. And I think that's part of it.
Absolutely. One thing I'd like to say about Okada, hats off to him. He has proven time and time again how great of a dance partner he is with the big guys and, you know, basically creating these scenarios where he can have long-term, you know, working programs with them to continue to, you know, draw money. And so, like, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, sometime next year Okada has the title again and we see him in, you know, Jonah battling for the winged belt. So we did have a question here from Jeffrey Fuss Rowe Dahmer. I don't know if that's a very good name to be using online, but he asked, is it possibly time for Okada to have an extended run in an American promotion? So I don't know if he's heard the rumors about WWE's like trying to pick up a Japanese talent or something, but or maybe he's advocating he would be used better in you know, Conland. I don't know what this question's about, but yeah, he's trying to, you know, ask us if we think he needs to go to America, which I would say a big resounding no. He's the ace of the company.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not time for that. Maybe, you know, maybe in his twilight years, but even so, I don't think his twilight years are going to look better than Tanahashi's probably. So I think he's going to stick around in New Japan for a while.
Nice. So moving on, we have the rest of the field here coming up. So we've got Jeff Cobb sitting at 4 points. He's got 2 matches left. We already kind of discussed on night 11, he was defeated by Jeff Cobb in the giant kaiju monster battle. So what are we thinking about Jeff Cobb at this point moving forward?
I mean, he's still in it, and he's got Yano and Lawler. That's what he's got left. So those are both matches he can win.
They're both matches I could see him easily losing to. He's in a precarious position with those two guys.
Sure. Right, because, like, I believe he will be Lawler's last match. Yeah, I believe that's true. So I kind of figure Lawler's going to give his all there, and he'll go out with a win, even if he loses to Okada here in a couple of nights. So that is, and then Yano, always a precarious position, especially because Yano's only got 1 win, right? So, like, in story, right, these guys are still fighting for their spot in next year's G1, right?
That's true too.
And
yeah.
that's a line that we use from time to time, right? That, like, you're probably not going to make it into the next G1 after a 1 win, you know, a 1 in 5, you know, performance. So not that that'll actually end up being true in all likelihood with someone like Toriano, even if he ends up with just the 2 points, and everything's a little skewed because of the shorter blocks, but
it's a little different, Chris, if you think about it. There's 28 guys, and who's to say they're going to go back to 28 participants? So, I mean,
sure.
Let's say they go back to, you know, 20-man block. That's like 8 dudes who are on the chopping block. So it's even more, you know, precarious than it normally would be.
Right. And many times, and I'm sure, you know, the listeners know, like, once you're in the G1, you kind of have a standing invite to come back, you know, until you don't. So, some of these guys, right? Like Yano's been doing this a long time, and he definitely serves a purpose in the G1, and people really enjoy to see him. But you got to wonder if with the glut of talent that wants to participate in something like a G1, you do have to wonder if some of these guys are kind of losing out right now. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those other guys that are doing so, but it's the guys that have been in the G1 for a really long time.
Yeah, and as much as you talk about individual, fans who enjoy seeing him, there's probably about the same amount of people on the other side who have been calling for him to not be in the G1 for years because of, they're over the shtick and they don't get enjoyment out of his stuff, and they'd rather it just be kind of kept to like a mid-card spot. And I hear that criticism every single year, and so there's probably people who would be rejoicing if he was no longer in this tournament, which, Suzuki's not in it and Makabe's not in it. There's a lot of guys who've kind of been down cycled. That's a very real possibility. Yeah,
and especially at 1-4 right now.
Right.
I do think we look back at that stuff, right? I do think that comes into play where we're looking at next year and who might be out, and they get booked accordingly.
Well, the last thing I'll say about Jeff Cobb is just it's very interesting how last year, he was presented as this Titan monster. He went undefeated, set these records and everything, but in the monster block, not the same levels of success. And he's kind of ran into two, speed bumps in Okada and Jonah. And those are probably the biggest losses that he didn't want to take. And depending on how things shake out, that's probably going to be what keeps him out of A block contention regardless.
Yeah, because those are tough tiebreakers to not have, especially at this point, right? So that makes it a huge uphill battle for Jeff Cobb.
Yep, but we'll see how that shakes out. Let's move on. We have Bad Luck Fale. He is eliminated at this point. He's got one more match. He was defeated on night 13 by Tom Lawler, 11 minutes and 5 seconds, and he's got one more match remaining. So at this point, Fale pretty much would be playing spoiler moving forward.
Yeah, playing spoiler and always a guy. So Fale, the A block's the only block with only one Bullet Club member. So whatever happens with Fale, you have to figure there might be some bearing on what's going on with Bullet Club. And right now, I don't know where you put that, right? Unless you're looking at the last night of the block, and there's a bunch of Bullet Club guys on last night of block. So, yeah. There's not a lot to say about Fale.
No.
So
the only thing is, some of those discussions we just had about people that could potentially be on the bubble, like I don't think Fale's spot is necessarily in trouble considering how tenured he is and he's a man of size and he kind of fits an important role. But he also is someone who historically doesn't perform from a match quality standpoint in those high levels either. You know what I mean? And he definitely hasn't necessarily had any classic performances in this tournament. For my money, the hardest he worked all tournament long was probably either the Okada or the Lance Archer match, and people derided the Lance Archer match because of the bad finish. So, I mean, who knows? Like, is it possible down the line Fale could be a guy that could be maybe disinvited from a G1 if they go to a smaller block? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think Fale's got enough going on in regards to the Fale Dojo and things of the sort. And I think, I do think he serves a role here, and I think he's perfect for the monster block. But we'll see what that match against Jonah brings, right? Because that's going to be an important match.
Well, that's the thing. In the past, I would have said no. Fale had a very secure spot in this company because he's a monster. But now there's other monsters.
We got a bunch of monsters now, yeah.
Now that there's other monsters, like, bro, you're not the only monster in this company. So, that's an interesting take. And he's going up the monster of all monsters in this block in Jonah. So he does have something to prove, even if he's out of the tournament. I mean, he's the old guard going up against the new guard. That's going to be a very interesting match from that standpoint.
Right. So if Jonah wins that match, is that a passing of the torch?
I don't know.
It might be.
Could be. Definitely could be. The next guy we've got up is Lance Archer. Again, he's at 4 points. He has 2 more matches left to go. And on night 12, he defeated Toru Yano 9 minutes and 14 seconds. Now, for those of you listening, you'd be like, yeah, of course, Lance Archer. Of course he's going to be, Toru Yano. But historically speaking, it's my understanding that he doesn't always do so hot against Toru Yano. And so this was definitely one that he could have potentially lost.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the Yano role, the banana peel, right? So,
Yep.
So he has Okada on the last night, and he has Jonah, like I said, tonight, basically, in a couple of hours. So we're going to know a lot more about where we're headed with Lance Archer after that match with Jonah. He's either going to be headed into spoiler land where he's just trying to spoil Okada, or he's going to be in the mix, and they're all going to be in the mix on that last night, which could make for some fun times.
Yeah, and I will say this about the Yano Archer match. I haven't been as interested or entertained by some of the Yano antics in this tournament as I have been from previous tournaments. But for me, I'm thinking that the Lance Archer match might be the high mark for Yano comedy in this tournament. And, maybe, I don't know, the Tom Lawler match was really good too.
That was good.
That was good. But the Archer match, the way that he, still maintained this monster, blah, blah, but he kind of went outside of his comfort zone, and he's taping up Yano and, everything like that. The way they, got, who was it? Was it Yuto Nakashima got tied to him on the outside? There's just a lot of cool stuff going on there. And then ultimately, Archer just, what's his finishing move? The fucking thing where he puts him over his head.
The blackout?
Yeah, he hit him with the blackout. It's that's awesome. Go to hell. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with Archer from here on out. And then last two, so we got Tom Lawler, and he was kind of, down at the bottom of this thing last week. But since then, he has rebounded by defeating Bad Luck Fale. He's at 4 points. He has 2 more matches. And that Fale match was one where, no, the match wasn't quite great or a classic, but I think Lawler did a lot to get as much out of Fale as he possibly could. And they had a pretty titanic back and forth struggle. And the fact that he was able to ultimately get that nasty knee on the brain on Fale was pretty impressive there. Yeah,
Lawler really shined in that match, and I think Lawler's had a really good tournament. Getting that win over Fale and focusing on the nasty knee on the brain as his finish for this tour has been really a good move, because it is something that he can hit on anyone if he gets them either to their knees or to the ground, and he has made good use of that. And Lawler, I think he's been a great addition to the tour and a great addition to the G1. I would love to see him in, I guess, a more traditional G1 in a 2-block 20 wrestler, but otherwise, I mean, even in this scenario, he's been a delightful addition. And even if he doesn't pan out, he's got Okada, and then he's got Cobb. So he's got a tough haul towards the tail end here, but hopefully he snags himself at least one more big win.
Well, we talked about last week how anybody that had Okada still on the docket had a ticket to possibly really make themselves in this block. And we saw how Jonah did that. Hypothetically speaking, if Lawler were to also beat Okada, that could obviously punch his ticket to maybe even being in contention for the block, but also kind of solidify him as the other outside guy who's really to be taken as a serious threat, the same way that it did for Jonah. Because, I mean, we weren't having the kind of discourse about Jonah last week that we are now. We weren't getting questions in our mailbox about Jonah last week. Now everybody's crazy about the guy. Same thing could happen if Lawler goes out there and he knees Okada to death and then pins this guy, or chokes him out. Who knows? You know what I mean? And I also like the idea of, we've seen in the past where there's been stagnation with the different units and groups in New Japan, but over in America, they've formed these other units like Team Filthy, like Team DK, and to send their leaders over here, I think if they were to hypothetically both win big key matches to kind of, establish those groups here, that sort of freshens things up overall for the product as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you bring in somebody new and they make a mark, then that's going to make for a fresher product. So, and fresh matchups. I mean, that's what for me has been so fun about this G1 is that there's a bunch of new guys, and there's a bunch of new guys interacting with the old guys, and it does feel like we're turning a corner to a new generation almost. And generation in New Japan means something totally different, but we're stepping back into the international promotion space, right? With a lot of guys who speak English, a lot of guys from the UK or the US or Australia or New Zealand, a lot of guys from all over the world in the G1. And that has been such a breath of fresh air after two kind of stagnant G1s where you saw just kind of the same guys who've been wrestling each other for a very long time. And, to be perfectly honest, I think that's why like a block like the C block doesn't have more hype, because all those guys have wrestled each other. And
even though those matches are awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you.
But what's got the hype? Jonah versus Okada. Right?
Absolutely.
That's what gets the hype in G1 season. Jonah versus Okada, a guy like David Finlay beating Shingo, Will Ospreay, Juice Robinson, right? Like, those are the things that people want to see in a G1, and those are the things that have a much deeper meaning in this scenario right now. And it is cool to see that corner getting turned, regardless of kind of how it plays out for our boy Lawler over here.
Well, he's got one of the biggest matches of his career right in front of him coming up on the horizon with Okada. So, and then finally, we kind of covered it there. Toru Yano, 2 points. He's been eliminated. He's at this point essentially just playing spoiler. I don't have much more to add. I've kind of gave my discourse on Yano during this segment.
Yeah, he's just got the one more match left against Cobb.
Okay, awesome. So let's move on, and we have the B block where things are a little bit more simple than any of the other blocks. Standing at the top of the mountain, we have Jay White. He is undefeated at this point, 8 points. He has 2 more matches left to go. And based on his most recent win, which was a defeat of the Great Khan, 18 minutes and 14 seconds on night 12, that has effectively eliminated Sonata, Chase Owens, Great Khan, and Tomohiro Ishii in this block, because all of those guys have 4 points. And even if Jay were to lose the remainder of his matches, he's got wins over most of those guys as it stands anyways, and he would win the tiebreaker.
All of those guys. He has win. Those are all of his wins.
Gotcha. And I wasn't totally sure on that, but yeah, I knew that earlier when I did it, but like, since we're on there, I'm like, I'm just going to hedge my bets and say, like, use the safe verbiage. But yes. So, I mean, coming up, he basically has Sonata and Taichi on the docket. Those are the guys that are in front of him.
He's got Taichi and Tamatanga.
Isn't that what I said?
You said Sonata.
I read that. That's incorrect. Tamatanga and Taichi. But before we discuss all that, I do want to say I really did enjoy the Great Khan Jay White match quite a bit.
Yeah, that match was awesome. Really, really enjoyable match. And even in defeat, Great Khan looked like a stud. He looked like a star, and he was doing something that you don't see all that often. And the finish was great. Great Khan had a claw on Jay White, and Jay White somehow maneuvered himself into the position he needed to be in to execute the switchblade. And he did it, but Khan still had the claw on Jay just for a split second, where you had that moment of doubt where you're like, oh, maybe Jay won't be able to turn and do the cover, or it'll take him a second, and that'll give Khan the space to kick out. And he didn't, but there was that brief moment during the count where you're like, is he gonna? And he didn't, but it was a great finish. It was a great match. Those guys actually had really good chemistry for guys who hadn't worked a singles match together. Yeah, really, really cool, really enjoyable match.
So when I was watching this, I actually watched this just before I got to the wedding, and I hadn't finished
like
it.
in a limo, like watching it on your phone.
Yeah. And I was surprised at how much of the offense Jay was taking. It seemed like Great O'Khan was like kind of getting eaten up a little bit, and it was basically Jay staying on being on top for most of it, and O'Khan being defiant and getting a lot of comebacks. And I told Jeremy when I got there, I was like, I don't want to spoil anything, but I think O'Khan's about to beat Jay White. And he's like, why? And I was like, because Jay White's kicking his ass the whole match. And I was like, and it feels like at this point from where I stopped the match, if he doesn't win, he's just going to get sunned. This is almost a quasi-extended squash. Then once the wedding was over and I left and I restarted, started from where I left off, that's basically where O'Khan starts his comeback rally. And I'm like, oh, okay, they're making this guy look incredible. But what I think the big story of it was he scouted the what's Jay White's finisher's name? I always fucking forget it every time.
Switchblade, right?
Is it the Switchblade or is it it's the Blade Runner?
Blade Runner. My goodness. If it's not right in front of me, I have no idea what it is.
Well,
I'm not a moves guy either.
I always want to call it the Sister Abigail.
Well.
And then I'm like, oh, it's the Switchblade.
No, the Sister Abigail is when they kiss on the forehead.
But right. But yeah, it's this Steve Borden and Jim Hellwig, the Blade Runners, and it seemed like O'Khan had this scouted because when he went to go for it, he stopped the move and put the claw on, and it was like the trump up his sleeve, the ace up his sleeve. He was like, "Gotcha, bitch!"
Right.
He's like, "I've been waiting for this."
I mean, it's the perfect counter.
It's the perfect counter, and I think in story he was waiting for this one opportunity for him to try to pull this move out, and he's like, "I got you,"
and it almost worked.
It almost worked, but Jay is so good at audibling on the spot to where the way you mentioned him maneuvering, the way he maneuvered was he turned his body and he did almost the same kind of kickback that you would do for an STO, but he kicked the soft part of his knee. So he went down,
right? And
that leverage is how he was able to, jerk him over. But yeah, you're right. He still had the claw the whole time, and I was like, oh my god. In the future, I'm not going to be surprised if Great O'Khan beats this man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This definitely set up something down the line where this whole thing happens again, but it doesn't work out in the way for Jay White, and I love that because that's the type of stuff that New Japan rewards their fans for paying attention to, right? So
right
now this whole thing's going to happen again, right? And O'Khan's going to have the claw, Jay's going to go for the Blade Runner, and no one's ever going to kick out of the Blade Runner. It's going to be a really long time before anyone kicks out of the Blade Runner, but he's not going to be able to get it because O'Khan's going to have some counter to Jay's counter, and that's classic New Japan is counter finishes.
Yeah, it just for some weird reason I had the thought of Floyd Mayweather. One of the things watching him in his prime was his ability to on the fly adjust his there's a few times in his career, whether it was at Judah or Miguel Cotto or Shane Mosley, where guys would find a tactic that would work for a short period of time against him, and then what he was good at doing was basically taking what they gave him and when they hurt him or even Marcos Maidana and adjusting on the fly and finding a tactic that put him back on top where he was able to readjust and still beat them, even if it was something he wasn't prepared for. And there's very few people in fight combat sports that have ever been able to do that sort of thing. And that's what we talk about when they use that term ring generalship, and ring awareness and everything like that. That's kind of what was displayed in this match from a storyline standpoint with Jay White. The fact that he was able to, even in the midst of something he wasn't prepared for, still adjust at the last second and find a way to win. So that was pretty cool. We did have a question here from Pulmonary Archery. He said, will Jay White stay undefeated until the semis? And if not, who's going to beat him? Now, I do appreciate the question, but I was a little confused by it because he's only got 2 more opponents, and I think we all know who they are. It's either going to be Tai Chi or Tama Tonga at this point, basically.
I think Jay White's going through the block undefeated.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's the thing.
I don't know.
Every really high-level, top-tier New Japan wrestler gets a G1 thing.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's got the undefeated block.
Ever in history, or just
no, not ever in history,
roster?
but like with current kind of,
right?
Not even current, but like last 15 years, 10, 15
Sure.
years, yeah. Anyone who's still active. So like, Okada had the streak where he didn't lose a G1 match in so many matches going
right.
2018, 2019. Tanahashi, Naito, Jay White, like those are the big 4 now. And I think that, Ibushi had lots of G1 things, right? And they were making him into Mr. G1, and he kind of still is if you could just look at recent statistics and data, right? But Jay White, that's such a Jay White thing to go through the block undefeated, even if he doesn't win the G1, or he doesn't even win in the semis. Like that's such a G1 thing to have him win go through the block undefeated.
Well, one thing I thought about was, typically if someone's the champion, they're not going to win the tournament. They might win a block, they might go to a finals, they're not going to win the tournament at this, juncture of the way that things are set up, right? And we all kind of agree Jay's due to win a G1. It's like the one big accomplishment in New Japan that's sort of eluding him. And the common thought is he's not winning this year. But then I started thinking about it, and I was like, if they really want to establish him as this like legendary Gaijin figure, what if they just have him win it as champion? And then who knows what comes after that? You know what I mean? For the rest of the remainder of the calendar year. So, I mean, the more that this is going on, I do still think, we're going to talk about it here in a second. Tama Tonga's got 3 more matches. I think he's going to win at least his next 2 and put himself in a position to be that guy that could beat Jay White in the final of the block. I don't know. But if Jay goes through, I think Jay should just maybe win the tournament at that point because he's due to win a tournament anyways.
The only way you do that is if you have something really interesting lined up for January 4th.
Yeah, or even just something interesting in general at the end of the G1 Climax period. And I'm not like this is not a hint. I don't have any info, but who knows if let's say Kenny Omega shows up at the G1 finals and you're like, oh my God, or something like that.
Well, that's what I mean by something really interesting.
Right.
Right. Like that's what I mean by something really interesting at the end of for Wrestle Kingdom. If you have someone like Kenny Omega, yeah, sure, Jay should win the tournament.
Right.
But here's the thing. Jay would then have this is interesting maybe. And I'm thinking this through as we're talking. Jay would have the right to a main event title match at Wrestle Kingdom, right? Like that's what you get when you win the G1. That's commonly accepted as what
historically, yes.
What if Jay loses the title between now and then?
Oh wow. Yeah, and then he
uses his briefcase to get back in the main event.
I mean, that would fit his character.
Totally.
I hadn't thought of it at all.
I hadn't either until right now, and I don't know how you get to that title match because we're so ingrained in someone has to beat Jay White so that there's a fall defense,
right?
Right, like
that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, and that's how this works. But someone could walk out at the end of the G1 and make a challenge, right? I mean, like that's kind of how things go in the spring. So,
well. Regardless of all that fantasy booking, which if it happens that way, it'd be very interesting.
It would be interesting.
he's got Tama Tonga and Tai Chi on the docket. And I will tell you this, of all the guys in this block, if there were any two guys that I'd be like, yeah, let's just have him beat Jay just for like the lulls, it'd be those two guys. Like, I would love it if like Tai Chi just like, Black Mephisto's this dude and
just takes him out, calls it a day.
It'd be so cool.
Heads to the back with Miho.
Oh man. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. My guess, at least for the time being, I think he's gonna beat Tai Chi and then be undefeated going into the match with Tama Tonga, and at that point all bets are off. Who knows what's gonna happen.
Right. Because here's the thing, if Okada's going through, Tama Tonga's a good semifinal for Okada based on their history last year.
Sure.
So that's a, if that's the direction, then that's an interesting match. That's a fun match.
It's also a very interesting potential fall title defense if we go a more traditional route than what we just kind of booked out.
Sure.
And, given all the, responses that he's been getting, who knows what that could look like in the midst of an actual crowd that's allowed to cheer.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Someone who's been coming back ever since the beginning of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Like, he's gotten himself over as a babyface, Tama Tonga. Like, yeah, of course. That sounds like a great fall defense.
And since we're on the topic, he's the next guy in the block. 4 points, 3 more matches to go. He's him and Tai Chi are the only two guys that still have 3 matches left to go who are sitting at 4 points. So he is kind of in a very interesting situation. And again, he is facing Jay White on the final night. So he does need to win the next, or at least one of the next matches before he faces Jay, most likely, but in a better situation, he probably needs to win the remainder of his matches.
Yeah, and he hasn't had much of a tournament for us to like analyze right now. He's only had the three matches, and he actually has quite a ways to go here.
And he's had no matches during this past week either.
Him
as well as Sonata in this block.
Yeah, they've had a kind of a stretch of time off, so there's not a lot to talk about except for kind of prospectively, like Tama Tonga. You kind of figure he's going to go into that last match with Jay White, probably with one loss, assuming Jay doesn't lose to Tai Chi. And then that's going to be kind of winner take all when it comes down to it.
Sure. And I guess we'll have to wait to see how that plays out. By the time, the show's airing, I think he's got a match coming up shortly. So, they'll probably have a better indication of that than anybody else. After him, we should talk about Sonata. He's got 4 matches or 4 points, but he is effectively eliminated. So, I mean, the most interesting thing about this for me is just the fact that he's a former, block finalist just recently in the last couple G1s. And, at this juncture, he's not even in play at all in this block.
Yeah, and he's not – I haven't eliminated him yet because – 3-way ties and things of the sort could wrap him back in.
Sure.
Because he could end up tied at 8, which is where Jay White is right now. So I haven't italicized him on my block box score yet, but he's right there. So one stiff wind and he's out. So, but yeah, I mean, Sonata got eliminated relatively early last year, too, if I recall correctly. So since he went to the final in 2020, he's kind of fallen off.
After that, we have Tai Chi. He's sitting at 4 points. He has 3 more matches left to go. On night 11, Tai Chi defeated Chase Owens 13 minutes and 25 seconds. And, the thing with Tai Chi is he had a lot of time off. We hadn't seen a lot from him, and then they brought him into this match with Chase Owens, who's been a bit more active during certain stretches of the G1 so far. And I was kind of wondering if having all this time off was going to ice him, or whether he was going to kind of be more well rested and be able to come into this match refreshed and able to perform well. And they did a lot of shenanigans towards the halfway point of the match where Chase was sort of, he got a lot of the early heat, kind of got a big lead on Tai Chi early on, and they started to really play up his heel tactics where he was trying to make passes at Miho Abe and sort of, elicit a reaction from her, trying to get her to kiss him on the cheek in the corner. And every time she was defiant and unwilling to give Chase Owens a kiss on the cheek, he would take it out on Taichi and say she was the one that was, causing all this issue and making him do it. Now, I don't know if I'm New Japan or if I'm the booker, if I put Chase Owens in a situation from a booking perspective where he's trying to, elicit that kind of response from a female. I don't know. That might not be a good idea. But overall, once the match picked up in the second half and it really started getting, to get going, these guys really did have a great match in the second half. And Chase is a guy that's been having a fantastic, from a performance standpoint, tournament. And like I mentioned, Taichi we haven't seen too much from him in the tournament. He kind of been, he's been a little bit more inactive, and we're going to see more of him on the second half here. But they had incredible back and forth, incredible, counters and reversals and near falls down the tail end. And then ultimately it was Taichi who was able to get out of the package pile driver and reverse it into a Black Mephisto for the 1-2-3, 13 minutes and 25 seconds. Chris, what were your thoughts on this?
Taichi has not been all that impressive to me for this tournament.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not very memorable, maybe, is probably the better way to say it. Like, they're just, again, similar to Tamatanga, there's not a lot to draw from right now. Because he still has 3 more matches, and 2 of them I think are kind of big matches that I'm looking forward to in Great O'Khan and Jay White. So, like, those are the guys that I want to see Taichi wrestle more frequently than anything. The Chase Owens match was good. The Ishii match was good. The Sonata match, if you like these guys, you like that match probably.
It was okay. That was his low point, I would say, so far for the tournament.
Yeah, so... But there's a long way to go for Taichi. I mean, halfway through the tournament, he said he was only going to win 2 matches. I don't know if you read that interview right before the G1 started.
No.
He was talking about how he thought Zack Sabre Jr. was going to either win the block or win the tournament. And the interviewer goes, "Well, what about you?" And he goes, "Nah, I'll get like 2 wins." And he's already got his 2, so I don't know what we do from here. So,
it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I think Taichi's a guy that they've, pushed to a certain extent, but, at the same time, I mean, it's not like someone who is pushed at the top of the card traditionally in this company, even still. So, maybe they throw him a bone. Maybe they've been doing favors for, Chase Owens in this tournament. So, maybe they could throw my boy Taichi a bone. I don't know.
Well, I was looking at where the potential fall defenses were going to come, and kind of looking for a hometown person, right, to beat Jay White. But if I recall correctly, Taichi's from Osaka?
I don't know.
Or Hokkaido? Either way.
I'm never good at the hometown stuff when it comes to Japan.
Either way, as I was like thumbing through it, trying to look for like the most likely person to beat Jay White, Taichi, they're not going to where Taichi is from. And I cannot recall exactly where. So I don't think that's the direction.
Well, I mean, if he doesn't pick up that win and that's not the direction, then that's just setting the stage for the big showdown at the end of the block for Tamatanga and Jay White.
Right.
I do think Taichi had a good match here, and like you said, he's only had a first half of the tournament, and so the jury's still out on the remainder of his tournament. But I think he's going to have considering the guys that he's got in front of him, I think it's going to be pretty great. And he's also a guy that's got Tamatanga in front of him, and that's a pretty big match as well.
Yeah, and I kind of like some of these guys being backloaded like this because Taichi now will be front of mind as we exit the G1 because he's about to have three matches in the last 10 days.
Definitely. So after that, we got Chase Owens, who has 4 points, and down the stretch here, he, like we just mentioned, he was defeated by Taichi, but on night 13 in the semi-main event, he defeated in probably one of the bigger wins of his career in singles victory, outside of probably that Tanahashi match from last year. He defeated Tomohiro Ishii in 16 minutes and 50 seconds in what I would call probably a truly great G1 style classic match. And I was kind of surprised at the way they laid this out. And I mean, this was a clean victory that he got here.
Yeah, as surprising as it was also really good. It was just as good as it was surprising. Because, I mean, you look at this match on paper and you think Ishii's winning, right? I mean, but Chase came to play. And they had a really, really good, solid match. Ishii gave a lot. Chase took a lot. And at the end of it, I mean, you had a couple of really excited broadcasters yelling for Chase Owens taking a victory. They love an upset at the broadcast table. So, and I love an upset at watching at home. So, that match was great. I mean, it was truly one of the, it was exactly the reason that you hope for Ishii to stay in this tournament is because these matches exist.
Yeah, for anybody that's talking about Ishii not being in the tournament, I do understand the logic of it, from you need to get the young blood in there and the aging out of certain guys and everything like that. But you show me someone that can time and time again go in there and have this kind of quality match with this many different opponents year over year, and you're not going to be able to show me anybody except for like maybe Kota Ibushi. There's nobody in the history of this tournament that's ever done that. But that's not to take anything away from Chase Owens himself. I mean, he's a guy that on this podcast for years, going back to the Genesis, we've always recognized the talents of Chase Owens and how great he was and how underused he might have been and unheralded. And this match kind of went to show like he's not just a good little hand, a guy that's great in a utility role, but like when given the opportunity to truly go out there and wrestle at the top levels, he's capable of doing it, and he showcased it right here. I kind of feel vindicated. A few years ago, I got rebuked by one of our listeners for saying that I thought that Chase Owens was a better wrestler than Sonata, and they said I was crazy. And maybe I was being a little facetious when I said that, or even exaggerating a little bit. But like, I don't know. In 2022, give me Chase Owens over Sonata.
It's certainly more interesting.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not a Sonata hater, but I mean, Chase picking up some wins now, that's interesting. There's something there. There's something. Where are we going though? Like, where are we headed with Chase? Right. Right. Like, is his ceiling like a couple of wins in a G1, or is his ceiling never openweight championship? Right. Like,
well, does the never openweight title even exist in this company anymore?
It's with Carl Anderson. Who of your listeners remembered that until I said it out loud just now? Like, I'm sure there's a significant portion that were like, wait, who? What? Huh?
They were like, take this title and never come back.
And just
the never title.
Disappear for a little bit. Well, we have the G1 and maybe come back for the G1 finals.
But Chase is having a great tournament. He, in my book, is pretty much eliminated. But let's move on to
he actually
Great
is
O'Khan.
Eliminated.
Okay, gotcha. And Great O'Khan is absolutely eliminated.
Yes.
He's sitting at 2 points. He had the match with Jay, which had he defeated Jay, that probably would have kept him alive and put him in a really great position. Unfortunately, he did take the loss there. But, still been impressed with him. And I'm seeing big things down the pipeline for Great O'Khan in this company based on, I think that this tournament has actually done more for him than what was last year's first G1. I can't remember.
Yeah, last year was his first.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot more out of him in this G1 already than I did last year.
Yeah, and I feel like he's coming into his own. I kind of thought this was going to be the G1 where he competed, and then fell off maybe late, but he's 1-3 right now. So that clearly has not been the path, but the matches have been better. He's been more competitive in them also. Mm-hmm. And I think that, there's definitely a lot to tap into with Great O'Khan. I think they know that he's early in his career. And the United Empire guys have to you kind of figure they're going to land, with Will having more points than Cobb, and Cobb having more points than Great-O-Khan, and Great-O-Khan having more points than Hanare, even though they're all in separate blocks. So I do think some of that inter-unit, balancing act does come into play here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think of that really. But, I mean, he's definitely early. And I think back to some of those, like, early G1s from, like, 04, 05, when we saw guys like Tanahashi and Nakamura and, like Shibata. And you could kind of see how they were booked. And, like, I think the company knew in a lot of those situations that those guys were the future, but they had time to go before they, like, really started to push them. And so you look back at some of the point standings, and, like, when you watch the matches, Shibata's out there in 04, like, kicking ass. But then you look at, like, his ending total, and he's not doing so great. And then a year later, those guys are pretty much leading the company. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple of years, that's what we see out of a guy like Okan here. But yeah, and again, loved the Jay White match. At the bottom of this block, we have Tomohiro Ishii. He's been eliminated. He's sitting at 2 points. Again, he was defeated by Chase Owens on night 13. We had a couple comments by a few of the listeners of the show. Hawaiian Punch BB said, if this is Ishii's last G1 appearance, that must mean he is focusing his efforts towards the best Super Junior starting right now. Correct?
I mean, I am the guy who always says that being a junior is more about your height than it is about your weight.
Sure.
And Ishii would fall into that category, but he's also he's got a lot going on.
This has been my crusade for years. We need to get him into the junior division. Just cut a couple kilos, and he'll be fine.
I feel like it's more than a couple of kilos.
Kevin from DC said, is Ishii the man or what? That is all. And yes.
Indeed.
Yeah, he's the man. And, like, even still at this point, I don't know this. I haven't done the math. But, like, I think it's hard to call a guy who's taken this many losses and who's sitting at the bottom of the block, like, the MVP. But, like, if you just went off match quality, I think he is the MVP of the tournament. I don't think anyone's had as many great matches as him this year already.
He's had a great tournament when it comes to that, right? If you're a person who watches the G1 or New Japan mostly for in-ring quality and that style, Ishii has shown up every night. And that, that's to be honored, right? I mean, and he's got Sonata left on the last night of block. I don't think that match is going to mean anything.
And you know what's funny about it, too, is, like, this is considered probably a down year for Ishii in terms of match quality, comparatively speaking to some of his other G1s.
Sure.
And in the best in-ring company in the world, in the most prestigious tournament that they have year over year, he's still outperforming everybody regardless. Like, that's how good Ishii is.
He's the best. And he's the best in these 16 to 20 minute G1 sprints. I mean, it's built for him. I mean, and he's a legend in it. And I hope it's not his last G1. I really, truly do. I really hope that that this is not the swan song for Ishii. But if it is, he's still giving it his all. And I think that's honorable. It's in its own way.
All right, cool. So, moving on to the second half of the tournament, things are a little bit murkier when it comes to point standings for the second half, but let's get into the C block here. So sitting at the top of the block, we have someone who's doing a bit better than I'd kind of projected him to be doing at this point in the tournament, the ace of the universe, Hiroshi Tanahashi. He's sitting at the top of the block, 6 points. He has 2 more matches to go, and on night 11, he defeated Evil in 19 minutes and 1 second. And Chris, what were your thoughts on this match? And, where do you see Tanahashi going from here?
So the Evil stuff doesn't bother me the same way that I think some people have, like, focused on, and has basically been a reason that they don't enjoy New Japan at this point, because Evil's not a main event guy anymore, even though this was a main event, but he's not in that space all that frequently. He's in that space in tournaments. He's in that space when we know we want him to lose. And one of these days, he's going to get another big win. This was not that day. So I kind of thought Evil was going to win this match because, as you kind of alluded to, I think Tanahashi's performing in a win-loss perspective much better than anyone expected him to coming into this tournament. I mean, he's beaten Naito and Zack Sabre Jr. and then got this big win over Evil. And everyone's kind of waiting for Tanahashi to fall off. And what if he doesn't? Right? And so
he might win the
he could win the block. I mean, it's not the most outrageous thing considering there's semifinals this year too, but sure. I mean, yeah, Tanahashi could end up winning the block. If he ties with Naito, he wins the block. He's got the tiebreaker.
The LIJ fans will lose their shit if that happens.
Yes, indeed. But it won't be the first time, and it probably won't be the last time. So, I don't know. How do you rule him out? You can't.
Sure.
Right? But he got the win over Evil. This match was good. I mean, I liked this match a lot.
It was good. There was a lot more cheating in a big main event style New Japan match than probably to my taste, you know. But then again, it's an Evil match. It just feels like we're, you know, on a loop and just saying the same things over and over and over again. At the same time, what I think they've done at this point is I think we're at the point where Evil is working like Evil from LIJ mixed in with the cheating tactics of the early stages of his, you know, Bullet Club heeldom before House of Torture even existed, you know what I mean? Or just the early like genesis of it. So he is putting in more effort, and you know, I only say that to say this. If you were an Evil fan and then you kind of fell out of favor with him because of what they were doing, you might want to come back because he's actually wrestling like the old Evil again. Now me, I've never liked Evil, so it doesn't do much for me. But I was surprised, like you mentioned. I thought Evil was going to beat Tanahashi here because he already has wins over Zack. He's got a win over Naito, and Evil's the other big guy in the block. And I'm like, you know, Evil's probably going to beat him and kind of, you know, even things up a bit more. But now Tanahashi got the win here. He kind of had a similar like roll-up victory in this match, the same way that he was able to kind of like beat Zack earlier in the block as well.
Right. So
that was a little bit surprising there, but yeah, there's a lot of cheating in this match for sure.
Oh yeah, they didn't hold back, but Tanahashi seemed to have the answer, which is what you're supposed to do as the ace.
It's not his first go around with Bullet Club, you know what I mean?
Right. He's had a couple of matches like this.
A couple of them. But that brings us to the next guy in the block, and that is ZSJ, Zack Sabre Jr. He's sitting at 6 points. He has 2 more matches to go. Again, he lost his match to Tanahashi, so does not have that tiebreaker there. But on night 12, he won a fantastic victory in a great hard-fought match over Hiroki Goto, 17 minutes and 31 seconds. And I can't say for sure, but I think this might be my favorite Zack match in the tournament thus far, and my favorite Goto match thus far in the tournament as well.
Yeah, I think that's probably the same for me. Because, yeah, I mean, it's definitely my favorite Zack match, and I think that Zack's got a couple of really good matches coming up, too. Because he's going to... You know, Zack and Evil is a fun match because they
always have good matches.
They have good matches. It's like it's
weird.
Uh-huh. And then he's got Naito on the last night, which, you know, you can still kind of point to that as being the block deciding match and probably the main event of that show.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe
there's definitely a possibility that that's the case.
I don't see why not. Like, you got the New Japan Cup winner, right? And then you've got Naito, and like that's the biggest star power on that last night, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say from like that standpoint, from like a drawing perspective, sure, but from a kayfabe perspective, it might not be. You know what I mean?
It's hard to say.
It is hard to say. It's going to depend on how a few things shake out with the A and the B block, because you've got some guys that have just done better in the tournament than both of them.
Yeah, and if it ends up being like White and Okada, that's obviously... No, that would be the semis.
They're in different blocks.
Yeah. So, Okada and Archer...
But it might be like, say, Jay and Tamatonga.
Yeah, that's probably...
If they're both undefeated, basically, going in, then... And he's the world champion, that might probably be the main event. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's true. I would have said... At the beginning of the tournament, I would have said maybe Ospreay and Juice Robinson... But
sure,
it's
not shaken out that way.
Shaken out that way. Yeah, not at all. So, yeah. So I think those are the two options.
Zach's having a fantastic tournament, and I'm in agreement with you. I think that it's going to kind of come down to him and Naito, and the big question is kind of like what's going to happen with Tanahashi, because they both need him to lose like now. Essentially.
Yeah, and Tanahashi's got Goto and Kenta, which are two matches he can definitely lose.
And he has before.
Yeah. And the Kenta, feud kind of rebirthed here. I think that could lead to something down the line here. And Goto, Tanahashi just disposed of him in the AEW Eliminator match or whatever they called that. So maybe it's time for Goto to get his win back. So wouldn't shock me if Tanahashi ends up 3-3 with the two losses to Kenta and Goto, but you can't rule him out either, or to go 4-2 for that matter, and still end up kind of in some sort of weird three-way tie then, and that would be a whole different kind of scenario that I'm not prepared to look at just yet.
Yeah, same. We have some questions at the end of this about that, but yeah. As far as this match goes, though, if you guys haven't seen it, Zach, him and Goto, they had an incredible war back and forth, and down the stretch, it really looked like Goto was going to get the best of Zach, and Zach was able to finagle his way into a Fujiwara armbar that just kind of came out of nowhere, and like he tapped out Goto, and it was pretty amazing. And that's kind of been Zach's like MO this year, is like having these incredible matches, getting put in a lot of trouble, and at the very, very tail end, being able to eke out a submission. He did that to Kenta in this tournament. He did that to Goto here, and he almost did that to Tanahashi if Tanahashi hadn't had the foresight to get the roll up. So
and Zach is working particular body parts in each of these matches, and then he's winning with a submission on that body part. So it's this old school, really psychology. It's this old school psychology of pro wrestling that like it's perfect, and you don't really think about it until all of a sudden the match is over, and you're like, oh, he was working the shoulder the whole time. Yeah.
Now, the next guy moving on, we just talked about his match, but Hiroki Goto, he's also in the mix. He's got 4 points. He has 2 more matches left to go. And again, he was defeated by Zach. And Goto's a guy that's really been impressive to me in this tournament. I know I might be imagining things, or maybe it's just my imagination, but like, I don't know. This just feels like the most motivated Hiroki Goto has looked in like 5 years. Like even the time when he came back from LA and was like, I'm putting the G and the G1 is for Goto and all that. I haven't seen him like work singles matches like this since like 2016. Like I don't know what's going on with him, but like he's reinvigorated. He's just having stellar performances.
It's that Chicago crowd that hyped him up when he came out of the curtain at Forbidden Door.
Yeah.
No, there might be something there. That was pretty energizing. He was the first New Japan guy out, and that he got a heck of a pop.
We always talk about Doki not wanting to go back to, the dirt floors of Tijuana. Like, this man went to Chicago and worked in front of crowds. He's like, I'm not going back.
Not going back to clap crowds.
Yeah, I don't know. Something's going on with him. His son wants him to win the G1 and be the AEW champion, so I don't know. But yeah, he's awesome, and I'm all for like Goto having a resurgence. Like, I think he's a guy that people have written off for a long time, and I would love for him to be a guy that just like, I don't know, came back and just did it.
He is a guy that can just pop up, right? And like, it wouldn't be that hard to build up Goto into a guy that is at least a block winner in a 4-block G1. I don't think this is the year or this is the block, but if he's gonna go at this rate and at this level. He spent enough time in the tag division that I would like to see something from him in the singles with the singles run.
Sure. Well, moving on, we have one of the darlings of the block, the leader of LIJ, Tetsuya Naito. He's sitting at 4 points. He has 2 more matches to go. And don't call it a comeback. Tetsuya Naito won another match in a string of return wins against Aaron Henare, 17 minutes and 31 seconds. And yeah, Gedo found a way to book the, lose early and then, come from behind, dramatic storyline. And that's what he's doing with Naito in this tournament, it seems.
Everyone seems to think that.
Or they could be telling a heartbreak story and he loses at the end.
Yeah, I mean, it does make a lot of sense for Zach and Naito to end up as the block deciding match, but I don't know. People have gotten their heart broken over Tetsuya Naito before, so I hate to count on anything.
I've never got my heart broken regarding Tetsuya Naito in any level, in any way, ever in my life. But I like him. But I thought that the Henare match was great. And, we'll talk about Henare, but I think he looked really good in this match. And then, Naito came back in dramatic fashion and got the Destino. And we did have a question here. Kevin from DC said, Uncle Dave seems dead sure that Naito will come back and win the C block. But if not Naito, who do you see taking C block in the end? Speaking of Naito, what did you think of his antics when Kenta autographed his book for him? His legs were shaking like a schoolboy.
I mean, if not Naito, who? I think if not Naito, Zack Sabre Jr. or Hiroshi Tanahashi. I think those are your two, right? As for the antics with the autograph book, Kenta has been hilarious with the book, and the undercard should not be ignored. The undercards on all these shows have been really awesome, so and fun. So
yeah, I'm glad you're on the show to tell people that I have not had the time to watch these undercards or to watch post-match comments. I'm barely making it through the G1, but I definitely once things slow down a little bit this week, I'll probably be watching those undercards on like 2.0 speed. You know what I'm saying?
The a peek under the hood, I guess. If I don't watch live, I skip right to the tournament matches, and I just watch them. I don't do anything while I do that. And usually what I'll then do is I'll go back to the beginning of the show, and as I'm putting together notes for the following night, I'll have the undercard up in either on one of my TV or in the corner of the screen. So I can't say that I'm being attentive to the undercard, but there's enough happening there that I think it's been fun and interesting, and I have really enjoyed the return of like undercard tags in the G1. Yeah. It feels so much better when those are there.
Yeah, I agree. And plus they're doing cool stuff on those undercard tags. Since there's 4 blocks, we're seeing people who are in multi-man tags who are not even in blocks that are adjacent to one another, but may potentially face each other at the tail end of the tournament if things go right for them. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so there's some kind of cool, fun, exciting stuff going on there too. Plus the opportunity that they're giving for guys like, Royce Isaacs and
Bad Dude Tito.
Bad Dude Tito is like if Cactus Jack and Al Snow and Dr. Death Steve Williams like had a love child. You know what I mean?
Everyone's got a different descriptor for this man. I just think
incredible.
He's got the look. I mean that.
Oh, he's got a great look.
That is clear. No, on the undercards, the thing that I see on the undercards is that like these guys who may not necessarily be having a great G1 in regards to wins and losses, they're winning like Henare, right? For example, every undercard tag he's in, he wins the fall. And, that's something. Right? It might be something a little bit. It's not quite winning in the G1 or winning those singles matches, but that's part of the build-up. So that is part of what I've been able to see as I've watched some of those undercards.
Yeah, definitely. I hadn't noticed that, but I'll pay a little bit more attention to it for sure. One last thing I'd like to say about Naito is like, I kind of feel right now, and maybe it's been this way for a while, but I kind of feel like he's in the Nakamura phase when he, like, just before Nakamura left the company, where it's like when he's put in a big role and he's called upon and he's needed to have a great performance, he can do it. But even in a G1, even on a night like this, like, you're not going to get like these classic performances out of Naito the same way you weren't getting them out of Nakamura in like 2015. You know what I mean? And like, I haven't personally been overly impressed with Naito so far in the tournament, but I don't want to like speak too much out of turn, because even with his busted knees and even with all the mileage on him, I just know that at the end of the time, like the end of the block, when he faces Zack, they're going to have a classic, and then he's going to go out there with like probably Ospreay or Shingo or somebody and like have another great match. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to turn it on at the end. But when you kind of compare him to some of his, some of the other guys that are contemporaries of his in this block, like, he's just not performing at the same level of those guys.
Well, he's probably going to turn it on tonight, because we've got Kenta tonight. So it's Kenta and Naito. Probably about the same time everyone's turning this podcast on, if they're downloading it overnight. So, and then you've got a week off, and we've got Naito and Zack Sabre Jr. So hopefully we've got two really, really good matches coming up. And, all things considered, the likelihood of Naito running the table seems high. I mean, that's what everyone seems to think he's going to do. He has won 3 straight, so that this is applicable to the match with Kenta. He's won 3 straight G1 matches 9 times in his career. So Naito, very streaky in his G1s. So, and that's a lot. There's a couple tournaments that he did it twice. He won 3 in a row and then lost, and then won 3 in a row again. So 3 is kind of his common threshold. 4 is, he's only done that a couple of times. So that's, that's your stat of the day.
Yeah, that's a good one. So we'll move on to Evil, who is sitting at 4 points, 2 more matches in this tournament. And again, he was defeated by Tanahashi on night 11. On night 13, though, he rebounded and defeated Aaron Henare 10 minutes and 28 seconds. Kind of gave my discourse on Evil. I mean, I think he's probably on the bubble for being eliminated. I don't see him being in play towards the tail end. Of course, you can never quite count him out, but with losses to guys like Tanahashi, and he hasn't faced Zack or Naito just yet, has he? He lost to Naito, didn't he?
He did lose to Naito.
Okay, yeah. So those are 2. That's the other one I was thinking of. So he's got some pretty big tiebreakers that he's like already lost.
Right.
So I find it hard for him to kind of be in play going down the tail end.
Yeah, he's got Goto and Zack Sabre Jr. left. So Zack Sabre Jr. on the... Where's that? The 10th. So Wednesday. And then Goto on the 16th.
So, yeah, the Zack match is a big one. And like you said, those guys, they've got chemistry. They have good matches. But putting that all aside, match quality out the window, if he beats Zack, like... Yeah, it's a totally different ballpark. Maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit too much on Evil at that point,
Yeah, if he beats Zack, his match with Goto has a lot of meaning on the last night, and Naito, I don't know. That would be a really surprising result, but also I've been surprised by Evil results in the past. So
hey, you just never know. They cheat,
And Zack is crafty, but I don't know. Tough to say.
And he's lost to Evil in the past as well.
Right.
So,
right.
We have Aaron Henare, 2 points. He's been eliminated. He was defeated by Naito on night 11, and then Evil defeated him on night 13. And, the big thing here, Chris Charlton kind of put this over in commentary, is like, Aaron Henare was never a guy that was really in play to win the block or the tournament, but his real quest was to prove that he did belong in this tournament. And from a performance standpoint, I couldn't agree more with that statement. I think he's definitely proved from an in-ring standpoint that he absolutely belongs in this field and that he can hang with the best guys in this, in this company. And he's done that night after night.
Oh yeah, he can go. And he's putting up a good fight. And like I said, in all those undercards, he's getting all those wins. I mean, like every single one of them, he's getting the fall. So this is part of him growing. This is part of his growth. And I think that I'm really excited to see, what the next G1 looks for Henare. And then the next one after that, right? Like if he's one step or one G1 behind Great O'Khan. I don't know that Hanari has the upside of Great O'Khan, but he can certainly be in the, in the middle of the block. He can play spoiler. He might have one good G1 where he has a good run. Like, he's a guy that deserves his spot. And I think, like I said, once you get invited into the G1, as long as you show up and you perform well, like, you're probably going to get that invite back again. So I can only assume we'll see him again next year.
So we got a question here from Rain Z Wrestling that said, what's Aaron Hanari's gym routine? Now, when I saw this question, I said to myself, didn't the same guy ask this question last week? And so I hit up this person, and I was fully expecting, just based on the question being repeated, like, we're dealing with the bot here. But then again, I thought, but it's about Aaron Hanari. That's very specific. Like, why? How is that going to benefit any sort of, like, whatever a bot does? You know what I mean? Turns out it was a real person, and they're like, I just was wanting to be persistent. I just want to figure out what this guy's doing. He's such a beast. And I was like, all right, well, I'll hit up Aaron Hanari and see what he's doing. And as of the time that we started this recording, he had not responded. So I was like, I'm not going to have an answer for you. At just a couple minutes ago, Aaron Hanari he sent me one of the most detailed workout plans I've ever seen in my
That's awesome.
We're not doing like I don't know if you can see this, Sam.
That's
so,
pretty long.
Can you see this?
I see a lot of words.
Okay, so it's a 9-week program through Steve Pipe Fitness. The best breakdown I can give you is that he does 4 days of strength training and 3 days of fight training. So 7 days a week, he's pretty much alternating between different strength and mobility exercises, and then he's alternating with actual fight training. But yeah, this stuff is kind of above my head. Like, I didn't go to school for fitness. I don't know what I'm even looking at, but yeah, it looks like it's a 9-week cycle, and then there's a deload compression period, and then he goes back into whatever this is, man.
A 9-week cycle.
Yeah, bro.
Wow. Holy cow, that's dedication.
I'll send you the link for this. Like,
Please.
He sent it to me. But if you guys want to look into it, Steve Pipe Fitness.
Dude, that rules.
I can't believe he sent it to me.
You asked. He's in service of the fans. He was
man.
on JCast just the other day. So
this is just really funny.
You don't see Damon ask him what his workout routine is.
But they talked about it.
Yeah, I know.
That's what I referred the guy. I was like, hey, why don't you go listen to JCast? They talked about it. And he asked the same question 2 weeks
He's like, nah, keeping it strong style for life.
He's like, fuck JCast. I don't like Damon. Also, by the way, now that we're on the subject, I listened to your guys' episode, and I felt bad. I was like, man, Damon has asked a lot more questions about Chris than I have ever asked on this show. Like, knows more about our co-host than we do.
Dude, I did not expect that format. And we just started talking, and I was like, is this it? Like, this is what we're doing? Are we gonna talk about the G1? It's coming up, but yeah, I was
peeling back the curtain. I hit up Damon, and I was like, I know we all think our show's the best, obviously, but like, I will admit, I think Damon's much better at interviewing people than we are. And the funny thing is, he doesn't want to interview anybody. Like, he's always like, we're not an interview show. I don't like doing interviews. But I'm like, but you're fantastic.
He's so good at it, and like,
you're so good at it.
As the interviewee, he's so disarming that all of a sudden I was like, yeah, I'll tell you my life story, no problem. I look back on that and I was like, I had a really good time, and Damon's awesome. Like, and we had finally seen each other in person recently, and that added to the comfort of that show. But yeah, I was like, how did we get here? Like, in the middle of the show, I was like, what?
But it wasn't just your show. Like, I listened to Karen.
Yeah,
and she's been on our show, and he's learning details that I don't even know about. And I was like, we hang out with Karen. I don't even know this stuff.
Yeah. Like, I know more about being a flight attendant than I ever honestly cared to know, but it was fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was funny. Let's move on to the bottom of this block. So we've got Kenta. He's sitting at 2 points. He has 3 more matches. I'm not ready to call him eliminated just yet because he still has 3 matches to go. But he didn't have any matches this week, so he's kind of been, iced out a little bit. But pretty big matches coming up. He's still got Tanahashi. He's still got Naito. So some pretty big ones, coming up on the horizon here.
Yeah, he's got Tanahashi, he's got Naito, and he's got Hinari. So he is Hinari's last match. So Kenta can still make a mark on this tournament. I think the most likely place for him to make that mark is by, taking Tanahashi out and kind of re-energizing that battle, especially after, Kenta was out for quite a while after the match with Tanahashi. So no shame in kind of re-upping that feud. So I don't think Kenta's going to end up being a factor, though he could still go 4-2. And that would definitely put him in the mix. But I do think the match with Tanahashi is the one to watch, and that is on the 14th.
I do too. And just because of all the build towards it, it's been feeling like they're really leading to some sort of like blow off in this tournament, and maybe even beyond the tournament as well, possibly. But like you mentioned, like a feud renewed, but it's all fueled by what happened back in January,
right?
From these guys. So, yeah, it's so crazy when you think back at like when these two guys were leading their respective companies. If you would have told me like a decade later, they'd be like feuding in the G1. It's just so wild.
After having a no holds barred ladder, super hardcore match at Wrestle Kingdom. Tanahashi and Kenta, you're looking 10 years ago, you're like, yeah, they're definitely going to have a hardcore match.
Well, that's going to do it for the C block. Let's move on to the D block, which I think is the most tumultuous of all the blocks. I saw you, kind of telling people look out for the 7-way tie.
That's a real thing.
On Twitter.
It's a real thing.
I think it is a real thing. Yeah. Sitting at the top of the block, we got. It's just so crazy.
I don't even know. But I have my eyes out for it.
David Finlay, 6 points. He's got 2 more matches to go. He had no matches over these past 3 nights. We did have a question. Kevin from DC said, "What do you guys think about David Finlay's performances since beginning the G1? Does he deserve a run with the U.S. belt, or is he destined to go back to where he was before the tournament started? Furthermore, are you glad that Will Ospreay's finally has the U.S. title to carry around, or do you not care about that much either way?"
The physical belt thing with the U.S. title was really it didn't ever feel like it was going anywhere. So it was just this kind of weird conduit to like Juice Robinson, David Finlay, and Will Ospreay interacting at the kind of the front half of this tournament.
Sure.
Which is fine. But again, I never felt like it was leading to anything. And I guess it kind of was, because it ended up leading to David Finlay beating Will Ospreay, throwing the belt at him basically, and being like, next time you defend this is mine, right? Finlay, right. If we had recorded this 5 days ago, he was the story of the G1.
Right.
Like, he was how we talked about Jonah earlier in the night, right? And that was his moment. And, he's got Yoshihashi and El Phantasmo left. So, like, he could absolutely still be in the mix towards the end of this block. But I think it was a really good way to get Finlay involved in the U.S. title scene and make it believable out of nowhere, right? Like, he hasn't had a big build up as a singles wrestler, and this was his moment, right? He had a good run in a New Japan Cup and made it to the semis and a couple of upsets, but this G1, beating Shingo, Juice Robinson, and then Will Ospreay, like, that's a pretty solid starting point as a featured singles guy. So am I glad the belt is finally back with Will Ospreay? Yeah, because like I said, I didn't feel like it was going anywhere, but and I do think this is where we're headed. I think we're headed to Finlay challenging for the U.S. title somehow, some way.
Well, initially I did think it was leading somewhere. I thought Juice was going to do extremely well in the tournament, and so was Ospreay. And even if they weren't both in play down the stretch, there'd be this whole feud over the belt, and it would kind of be settled there, and then maybe even continued on from there. But then once they threw the David Finlay thing in, it kind of got wonky for me. The one positive about it, I will say, is that like how you kind of just mentioned, once David Finlay beat Ospreay and he had that physical, possession of the belt and he was able to lay claim to a challenge, that kind of put him ahead of the pack in terms of challengers over, like, let's say, Ospreay just lost to Shingo. What could hypothetically stop Shingo from, like, potentially being the guy that challenges? Well, it's the fact that there was this whole dispute over the belt and, David Finlay already laid down the gauntlet. So if that's a means to an end, I think there is some positivity there. I'm a guy that's a little different. I think for a lot of fans, they've been trained over the years that, like, especially in pro wrestling, they see the title and the belt itself as being interchangeable. They even call the belt a title belt. You know what I mean? And so there's no differentiation between those two things. But me being, like, either an old school fan or even just following combat sports, I just think about it from, like, a logical standpoint. What if someone stole Anderson Silva's belt? Does that not make him the middleweight champion? Like, they would just make him another belt. Wouldn't really matter because no one would care, like in the real world, because the belt is a trophy. The belt is not the title. The title is bestowed on you by recognition as being the best guy for whatever reason, whether it's, a weight class or, a hardcore champion or intercontinental you're the champion, and the belt is just an outward representation of what you have. If they steal it, doesn't matter. But I think for a lot of fans, that's too much to think about, and they're just like, the belt's the title, and he took his belt.
Well, there's a reason. There's a reason the belt exists, and that. Oh, okay. Wow. I'm gonna leave this in.
Why does the belt exist, Chris? Tell us about it.
The belt exists to show that someone's a champion. Right? So if someone else is running around with the belt and the guy that's supposed to be the champion's not running around with the belt, that can turn people, as the guys at Voices of Wrestling like to say, that'll turn people into corn cobs and they have no idea what they're seeing.
Right.
So,
well, I liked the story better when it was like Juice had an actual claim. He never actually lost the title. You know what I mean? And so, like, that just logically made more sense. But for whatever reason, they did not go that way.
Well,
so
yeah, and we still have Juice versus Ospreay on the last night of the block.
So it's very confusing that they didn't go that way.
Correct.
It's the final night.
It's the final night, and listen, Juice Robinson loves nothing more than setting up a U.S. title match on his last night of a block of a G1. He's done that more than once already, hasn't he? I know he did it with Moxley in 19.
Yeah. No, he definitely did. Yeah, I can't think of other times. Well, there was that one year where he was the champion.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
And he just lost and lost and lost. And then on the final night, Cody, who wasn't even in the tournament, challenged him for the title. And it was like, what? Why?
Yeah, Juice, he just, like, lives around the U.S. title, around the G1 time. It's kind of an odd, like, slot for him.
Well, and it's weird that we're having this kind of discourse about Juice just in general, because it felt like with the rebranding and reintroduction that we were going to be seeing him as like a main player,
right?
An upper mid card guy. But so far, it kind of hasn't panned out that way. But I'm not gonna throw in the towel on it just yet, because it hasn't fully played out.
Right, the Ospreay match is going to be really important for him, and also, like, the character work's been excellent from Juice.
Yeah.
Like, the recharacterization of Juice Robinson as rock hard Juice Robinson has really landed, and he's looked really good with it. So we'll talk about him as we go down the line here.
Well, I think that's going to do it for Dave Finlay. So next up, we have Shingo Takagi sitting at 4 points, 2 more matches to go. On night 12, in the main event, Shingo Takagi defeated Will Ospreay 21 minutes, 55 seconds. Going into the match, Will Ospreay had a 3-1 edge record over Shingo Takagi. However, as they pointed out on commentary, I'm sure due to maybe possibly your work, Chris, Shingo, or Will, had never beat Shingo in any match in under 30 minutes. As we all know, the G1 has a 30-minute time limit, and Shingo holds his one victory over Will Ospreay in a previous G1. So this kind of not ties them up, but brings the edge a little bit closer. He's now 2-3 against Will Ospreay all time. all of his wins against Will Ospreay are G1 matches.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of an interesting and fun way to look at it, because they also worked this match like they needed more. They're going to need more time. They came out hot, and they worked it like a G1 match and not like a main event for a title. That would be a 60-minute time limit. So, I mean, the IWGP World Heavyweight match that they've had is Will Ospreay's longest match on record. It's 44 minutes. And that's like the second longest Shingo match on record, and it's the longest that went to a finish. So these guys...
That's his longest on record match period, or singles match?
Singles match.
I think I've seen a tag match against Aussie Open, a TLC match that was longer than that.
That's possible. I only have singles match records that I'm looking at right now because it's the G1. So
gotcha.
Yeah, Shingo's longest singles match, except for a draw with BB Hulk at some point in when he was with Dragon Gate. So that is, that's a part of the story, is that Shingo wins these G1 matches because they both wrestle like they need to end a lot faster than they normally do, right? So
yeah.
So I wasn't surprised to see Shingo take the win here, and it does set up a little bit more of a more interesting run for Ospreay going forward. Makes things a little more uneasy for him as he heads into his matches with Yoshihashi and then Juice Robinson.
Absolutely. Well, undoubtedly, the match quality was just off the scales. I mean, this was really, really top-tier wrestling. And, that's to be expected. Whenever you put Shingo and Will Ospreay in a match together, they're just going to perform at the highest levels that the sport has to offer. But like you mentioned, this was worked differently than some of their title matches or even the Best Super Junior final that we saw in the past. And it kind of reminds me of the one time we saw Okada and Ospreay in the G1 together and how they worked that match extremely different than all the other matches in their 4-match series. And it was necessitated because of the time constraints and everything. And also, just everything that goes into a G1 and, everything like that. So, hot take, even though I thought this match was great, even though I thought this match was the best match of the tournament so far, in my opinion, I would say, and actually, maybe I should answer this after I ask this question, because we had a question regarding what I'm going to say next. Morbid Suplex asked, how would you rank Day 12's Shingo Ospreay match compared to all their other matches with each other? And I got to tell you, even though I thought this match was incredible, like I mentioned, and probably the match of the tournament so far, in my opinion, I think this is the lowest ranked match that I've seen of the two guys of the whole series. And that just tells you how great I think that their matches are, because, I don't know, I'm not quite 4.5 on this. I'm not quite 4 3/4. Like, if I could, I would give it like 4 2/3.
You can give whatever you want.
I guess I could, because it's all imaginary, right?
It's all fake stars. So
stars are real, bro.
Okay. I mean, yes, it's a real shape that exists. I will never get past how great their Best of the Super Junior final was. Like, that was just world class, and a really important match for like me and my like fandom and my involvement with New Japan too. So like, I just don't think I'm ever going to get past that. So otherwise, I mean, these guys, they have great chemistry. I don't do the star thing. I don't remember like really particular specifics about what was perfect about this match that wasn't perfect about the other. Like, I just know that these guys, if you put them in the ring together, it's going to be awesome. And this was no different. I think to some extent, though, I mean, we've seen it. This is the 5th time that they've done it in 3 years or so. And that's right. I don't want to say that's a lot, but it is kind of a lot.
It's not enough.
They could keep doing it and people would love it, and as would I, but I don't know that they did anything groundbreaking with this one. And usually when these guys get in the ring, they do something that you're like, oh, that's new.
what they started doing that was groundbreaking was they both were teasing on a very plausible level that they might hypothetically try to go for both of their finishers off of the top rope on each other. And neither of them got it, but I was scared that they were going to try to do it. And they're both crazy enough to where one day I think they might
They're going to do that.
They're going to do it. And I don't know what a Stormbreaker off of the top rope or a Last the Dragon off the top rope really looks like. You know what I mean?
Last the Dragon makes more sense because you're faced out. Like I could see that happening.
I'm even kind of okay with them doing it from the second rope because it's like, oh, that's a super version. But bro, they were on the top rope, and I'm like, I don't know, man. But they both stole each other's. Like Shingo like kept trying to go for Stormbreaker. Yeah. He didn't get it. Will Ospreay gave him a Made in Japan.
He hit it, right?
He hit it. And it was awesome. Yeah.
Shingo's face was awesome.
Yeah.
When Will's holding him up.
And if you guys want to break down the matches, that's where Jeremy shines. You put the wrong two guys together for that stuff because here's the way it works for me and Jeremy. Jeremy tells you what happens in the match, and then I just be like, oh yeah, remember this cool thing happened? I'm the color guy. I just add a little bit of flavor to everything. So me and Chris are not the guys too.
Yeah, I'm literally a professional analyst of this stuff. So I'm here to analyze and see where we're going and not talk about really particulars of match structure. But
right.
I know that these guys know how to do match structure.
Well, even if I were to break down this match, it would be nearly impossible because they were wrestling at a breakneck pace.
At a rate that only they can get to.
Right. And there were so many. The one thing that they did that was incredible was just reversal after reversal after reversal after reversal. Like they had worked out these actually, I don't even want to call it worked out because I don't even know how they're actually doing it. And I myself have trained a bit in wrestling and learned a thing or two about match layout. And I don't know how they're laying out their matches. I can't figure it out. Like I'm like, are they calling on the fly? Are they like, what are they doing? Is this all by feel? But like, it's just like, I'm going to go, like, they're just not hitting anything for long stretches. And then finally someone hits something that's like, oh my God. And then like down the tail end, Shingo was murdering Will Ospreay with all these crazy lariats. The one thing that caused Will Ospreay to lose this match from a storyline standpoint, though, was he went for a hidden blade, and Shingo had it scouted, and he brought it into a cross. He caught him into a cross arm breaker position, and then instead of staying in that position, he actually wrenched as hard as he could back on it to completely disable the arm. And from that point, Will Ospreay was very like immobile with that arm. He tried to go for Stormbreaker several times. He couldn't actually get him up for it, and then he really had trouble even utilizing that arm for striking. And that was to basically take away the hidden blade altogether. That was the undoing. Once he was without that wheel, he was pretty much a sitting duck, and like he got brutalized by Shingo for the rest of the match. And down the tail end, like Shingo just like killed him with a bunch of lariats and elbows, and then put him up and bam, dropped him on his head, Last the Dragon, and like got him out of there. Like this match was incredible.
Yeah, as always with these guys. And I hate to downplay it by saying like, yeah, they've wrestled 5 times in the last like 3 years, because like it's always awesome, but it's the highs get less high every time they go back out there because there hasn't been huge space between these guys wrestling. So if they take 2 years away from each other and they get back in the ring with some high stakes or a big G1 match, shoot, it could be night 1 of G1 2034, right? Skip a year and come back to it, and you're going to get a hell of a match again. So
the way I see it, though, is like there's just some classic combinations of guys in certain time periods of wrestling where it's like they could wrestle a million times and maybe you can't differentiate too much between the matches unless there's a big stage, but you don't care,
They're all great.
I think of Ray and Dean Malenko. You know how many times I saw Ray Mysterio, Dean Malenko wrestle on pay-per-view and on Nitros and Thunder and all that? Like, I don't even know how many times, but I love them every single time. And like, I want this match more. Like, just give me this match. Like, pump it into my freaking veins.
I mean, you got to figure they should do this match in the Tokyo Dome at some point, right?
Oh my God, they have to.
Right? Like, we got to get there. Maybe it's for the U.S. title this year.
I don't care.
Yeah, that's fine.
Let's just
do it. Third from the top. Give him 32 minutes. So then Will's got a chance to win because he's crossing the 30-minute threshold. Well,
speaking of Will, he's next up on the list. 4 points, 2 more matches to go. He's tied with quite a few people on this list. And, like we mentioned, he just lost to Shingo. So that's his second loss of the tournament. The one previous to that was against Dave Finlay. And, I think for a guy that's considered, a top tier guy in the company and a match of the year or a wrestler of the year candidate and blah, 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 everything like that. It's kind of surprising that he's not leading the block the same way that Jay White and Okada were leading their blocks,
Do you think that has anything to do with him having the U.S. title?
Oh, yeah. I definitely think that's a huge part of it. I also think that this block is just when we first did our preview, we talked about how this was the hardest block to sort of even predict just because Shingo was in it and Juice Robinson was in it and, even ELP. And we're there's just a lot of names and this seemed like it was going to be a parity-based block anyways. And then you add the fact that he has the U.S. title. And, I mean, that's a perfect recipe for him to be, equal to the rest of the guys in the block where, if he'd been put in, say, C block, I don't know if this would be the same situation.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and so he still has Yoshihashi and Juice Robinson left, so he's primed to come out 4-2, but that doesn't mean a lot in this block right now. That doesn't separate you from literally anybody. So the D block's going to come down to a lot of tiebreakers, I think.
Well, yeah, because I mean, even if hypothetically, Shingo and Will or whoever, I don't know, certain people like you mentioned, even if many of them go 4-2, they're gonna have to hope that the right people don't go 4-2, and it's just gonna be a perfect storm where it's how is this gonna all shake out? Either they're all gonna be tied and there's gonna be a tiebreaker, or they're gonna have some sort of playoff of some sort. And this is something that we discussed on the preview many weeks back when you were on the show. We said this is going to probably happen. So the big question, Chris, is kind of what we've alluded to is, we keep bringing up these tiebreaker scenarios. Well, what happens if, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or even 7 guys in a block end up tied? What is going to actually play out? I mean, we've seen several different things happen through the history of Grand Prix tournaments in New Japan, but I'm not sure what they actually have set up to, basically work that out.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of options here when you talk about multi-person ties.
Right.
Or just ties in general. I mean, I think we all just kind of assume that we're going to see the, whoever beat whoever, that's the tiebreaker, right? The traditional classic tiebreaker. And I think that that's true, and I think that that's going to be the case, but in the event of the multi-person tie, we do have this night of the semifinals that something could land early in the card to break that tie.
Oh, yeah, because I mean, if you've just got the 2 semifinals and you're not sure what's gonna lead, let's say it's D block, because that seems the most likely. You could hypothetically, if needed, fill in 1, 2, or multiple matches with, tiebreakers if necessary.
Right. So, and I don't know if that's the direction they would go, or, I mean, if that's the direction they would go in the event of a 3-way tie, right? Because we all have this, if a couple of people tie, we make a mini block, and whoever's got the best record amongst that mini block is the winner of the block. Is that out the window because we have this extra night and we could do, I don't know, a 3-way match or something?
Well, Well, like in recent times, they've done the very convoluted, well, if two guys end up tied and, or like three people and there's no tiebreaker, then they do like the exhaustive mathematical like equation. They like look at their common opponents. And, yeah, it's some sort of, you've actually worked it out for us before, and it's kind of confusing. But like I've seen in the past with New Japan where like they've actually had like mini round robin tournaments when necessary in some of those early iterations of the tournament. We've also seen like playoff matches that have played out in the earlier parts of nights as well. And I mean, who knows? What if they end up with a bunch of people that they just can't figure out? Maybe they have an over-the-top battle royal early on the card, or maybe they end up maybe they do like a 4-way elimination match. Like, I don't know what's actually going to be decided on at that point. But it seems more and more likely like this might be a real thing for the D block.
Yeah, if it's going to happen, I think the D block is the block where it's going to land, because they're so compact right now. And I think there's going to end up being some separation, but I do think there's going to be a bunch of guys in the mix.
Wow. Well, let's move on. Next up, we got Yujiro Takahashi sitting at 4 points, 2 more matches to go. On night 11, in one of the biggest surprises of the tournament, Yujiro Takahashi defeated Juice Robinson in 11 minutes and 36 seconds.
Something weird's going on with Juice. Like, I can't pinpoint it, but it doesn't feel right.
It feels like they like made him a lot of promises and told this guy like, you're gonna be a big star, we're bringing you in, and then like they got him signed and they're like, fuck yeah, we're putting you back where you were.
He's not even back where he was, really. He's just eating L's.
Well, I mean, before he was in the tag team, that's where he was.
Yeah,
he was eating L's. And it's weird. It's really weird, man. I don't know what's going on. Like, part of me is wondering, like, are they going to do, like, a tie situation and then he ends up just still miraculously like emerging from the like rubble as the last survivor just by who knows? I don't know.
That seems like a stretch, but I suppose it's a possibility.
But like the last thing I expected was like Yujiro to beat him. I was talking to Jeremy about this. Jeremy's like, dude, he got eliminated, and I was like, no, he's not eliminated. And he's like, no, I think that's it for him. And I'm like, no, but like, yeah, even Jeremy was like, bro, I think they got him out of there. And I think they use Yujiro to do it.
Yeah.
But that was pretty surprising.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Juice. There's a lot of discussion in a couple of different circles that I'm in, and nobody can figure out why or what is going on with Juice Robinson.
Yeah. Aside from that, I don't have much more to say. I mean, it's Yujiro. I just can't fathom that he's going to play any major role. The one thing I will say is, like, anytime I'm talking about individuals that I'm like, maybe they shouldn't be here, it's always Yujiro.
He's the guy. Yeah.
Awesome. So next up on the block here, we've got a guy that I used to talk that way about, but I'm not going to ever again, and that's Yoshihashi. He's sitting at 4 points, and he's got 3 more matches left to go. Night 12, he defeated ELP El Phantasmo 15 minutes and 47 seconds in an awesome match, and one of the more surprising finishes of the tournament, in that Yoshihashi beat ELP. I was not expecting that whatsoever.
Yeah, I didn't know where this was going to go, honestly. Like, because ELP is obviously new to the tournament, and Yoshihashi's had like a good run in the performance-wise in the G1 past couple of years, so it was tough to tell who was going to come out on top here. And I think this match was really good. I think Yoshihashi's been great. I think El Phantasmo's been a nice addition to the tournament, and I think that both of them have a spot here, and I think that that's more than some might have said kind of on the way in. So Yoshihashi still has David Finlay, Will Ospreay, and Yujiro coming up. So he doesn't have the easiest path forward, but he's still in the mix, and that's more than he could say about a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a match where I think a lot of people probably figured ELP would pick up a needed victory and sort of get himself in the mix here. And yeah, they kind of forewent that and had Yoshihashi pick up the win here, which was kind of surprising. But, he's still got a little bit more tournament ahead of him than the rest of the guys in this block. 3 more matches to go. And it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out for him down the stretch. But for my money, he's like one of the top performers in D block, which is not something I saw coming whatsoever.
Yeah, people are really enjoying the Yoshihashi run again. So it seems to be a trend, actually. Yeah.
And then next up, we've had a lot of discussion on him. I don't know how much more we are going to have here, but Juice Robinson, he's got 4 points. And am I correct in this? He's got just one more match left to go?
Yep, he's just got the match against Ospreay left to go.
Okay. So, I mean, depending on how things shake out over the next week, he's either just going to be playing spoiler on that final night and be eliminated by the time that match comes up, or he'll be in play to potentially, depending on how things shake out, tie himself up with some other individuals and, potentially be in the mix down that final stretch. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what is going to happen with Juice here is that he's going to end up he's gonna make something out of this U.S. title thing on the last night. And I don't know if that means he's going to spoil Will or he's going to end up out of the kind of U.S. title mix by losing to Will, which I actually think is probably the more likely scenario, is that like Will's just going to set him to the side, at least for now, and then I think the U.S. title feud's going to end up being David Finlay. So, Juice, disappointing tournament from the win-loss perspective, but from character work, he's definitely gotten himself some attention, and he's been fun to watch and great in the undercard. So, curious to see where this goes.
That's true. My one issue though is with Juice, he seemed to be poised to be elevated from a star, level essentially. And if he comes into the tournament and he just has good matches and charismatic performances, but ultimately loses most of the matches in the tournament and then loses the defining, final match of the tournament, he's no better or worse than he was before he re-signed with the company. In fact, some people might say that's demotion, which is not what it looked like it was going to be for him back in Chicago when he first kind of went into that four-way with all those other big stars.
Sure. Yeah. It is baffling, the Juice booking and the Juice direction. Not really sure what to make of it.
Right. Well, like we mentioned, night 11, he was defeated by Yujiro. And then night 13, he defeated El Phantasmo, who's the last guy we got to talk about here on the block. And it was another classic Bull Club versus Bull Club match. But he lost by disqualification, or Juice Robinson won by DQ, 16 minutes and 9 seconds. And this was a match that, I think there was it was pretty divisive. The early part of the match was extremely comedy, very almost kind of slapstick. They were working in slow motion, pretending to wrestle. And then somewhere in the middle, things got heated. People started rolling each other up. And then it turned into like almost a bloodbath. Like there was chairs and, a table, and Juice's head went through the table and he was busted open. I don't know, hardware.
That was cool, actually.
Yeah. And it started getting really great in the second half, but then out of nowhere it got so heated that ELP threw a chair into Juice's face in the ring in front of the referee, and then they just called it off. And so, like, it was a deflating finish to something that, for me, I thought started pretty terribly. I did not like what they were doing in the first half of the match whatsoever. There's some people that loved the comedy, and they were all about it. For me, it's most of what I hate about pro wrestling. Like, that stuff I'm not into whatsoever. But when they got going, it was great. And then it had a terrible finish. Like, I actually think that this match might be a potential for worst match of the tournament in my book, honestly.
I mean, I kind of attributed it to just being Bullet Club, doing Bullet Club things, right? And then, what I think about those is that when Bullet Club starts to do those things and you know that the two wrestlers can wrestle, like that they're good wrestlers, then it's more frustrating, and like you want more, right? So I think that is why I was most frustrated with that match, because I wanted to see Juice and ELP have a match, and eventually we kind of did, even though it took a long way to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of what it was for me, was just the frustration of like, these are two of the best guys in the block. I want them to like actually wrestle. Right,
exactly.
But yeah, and I don't know. I'm also questioning. I mean, they haven't done many DQ finishes in the tournament, granted, but there's been a lot of count out finishes and just kind of tomfoolery. It's something I didn't personally need. And since we're on the subject, El Phantasmo, he's sitting at 2 points. He's got 2 more matches to go. The best he can hope for is 6 points. That would get him tied to where Finley is. He's going to need a few things to work out in his favor to get maybe even potentially in that, tied/tiebreaker scenario. But I am surprised to see Juice and ELP somewhat towards the bottom of the standings, essentially.
I'm more surprised to see Juice down there, because ELP, I think, is technically still seen as a junior. And he's a big junior, but he's still junior. So with that, typically you don't come out of the block hot, right? So Juice down there, absolutely, that's super surprising. But ELP, he's about where I expected him to be on a win-loss perspective. And then, if you look at the competitiveness, he hasn't really had, he had the good match with Ospreay, but he hasn't had another match that's really like stand out. So I'm waiting for that. I don't think so he's got Finley and Shingo left, so he could have a couple of really good matches.
Yeah, and I think the Shingo match is probably the one most people have circled at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, ELP, his tournament was always going to be about how it started and how it ended. So he had Will on the first night and Shingo on the last.
Yeah, and I guess none of us can be too surprised about how things have gone, just given the history of juniors in the G1 Climax in general. But at the same time, I think a lot of people are hoping that this might be the start of a more permanent situation for him, and maybe this is an indication, hypothetically, depending on how things shake out, that they might still send him back to junior for the time being until they're ready to like full-fledged like call him up to the heavyweights.
Yeah, they did that with Ospreay even, but I think that was more by necessity. That they needed someone in the junior division after Hiromu was out. So tough to say. El Phantasmo was a big guy. It's a hard sell to see him as a junior, to be honest. So, part of me feels like that's why he hasn't had a big run at the top of the junior division, because he isn't necessarily that.
Sure. Kevin from DC asked us, he said, do you see El Phantasmo working towards a babyface turn and a split from Bullet Club after his DQ against Juice? It doesn't seem like such a move will happen anytime soon, but it could be in the works regardless. So not, kind of on the subject, we're talking about his status as a junior versus a heavyweight. There's also kind of some speculation from folks. I think a lot of people kind of do see that there's potential for him as a babyface out there. Is that a way that you see them possibly going, Chris, or do you think that they might keep him in this role for the time being?
Yeah, I don't think anything's imminent, but I did have that thought that there's not really a slot for him in Bullet Club anymore. Right? So, he's not necessarily going to be the junior tag guy with Ishimori. He's probably never going to be the top junior with Ishimori there, as well as, someone like Ace Austin coming into the fold, right? So he's another option. So he is kind of the odd man out. So and he's one of those guys that could certainly wrestle a more babyface style and do so really well, and probably get the fans behind him. So I think there's a chance that this is the long play of a turn.
Nice. Well, that is going to do it for our coverage of the blocks. We do have some questions here regarding G1. We're going to cover those. Just full transparency, guys. With Jeremy out, we've done the best we can. By the time you guys are listening to this, this is going to be a seamless podcast. But we have had a lot of technical issues tonight. So, like, a lot of the subjects we normally cover, like previewing the next week and all the news and, New Japan of America, probably going to nix most of that. Some of the questions, we're going to push that stuff to next week. And so we're going to cover these questions, do recommend an excursion match of the week, and then get you guys on your way. And we'll, when Jeremy comes back, we'll try to cover the rest of that.
We are also pushing up against, 2.5, 3 hours already. So.
Oh, gotcha. Nice. So let's get this stuff done here. So Cap MF 89 said, what's your opinion on 4x 7-man blocks?
We kind of talked about that at the top. I kind of jumped the gun there. I don't mind 4 blocks, but I'm not sure about this 7-man and everyone kind of needing like a bicycle.
Right.
That's a kind of a funny word smash. Not bicycle. They need a cycle on a bi. That's the part of it that I don't love. And I think if you went up, right, it's going to sound crazy, to 32, and you do 4 and 8, and then you can have block segregated cards too, because then you'd have 4 matches per each block per each round or card. And we're already seeing 4 block match cards throughout this G1, and I think it would be nice if that's all contained into one block. So if it's me, if we're not going back to 20-man, a 20-man tournament with 2 10-person blocks, I would like to see it go up to 32, and then you can do an A block night, and then a B block night, and then a C block night, and then a D block night. And you do end up giving guys a little bit more rest, but in a way that's more familiar, I guess.
I agree. I think from a mathematical standpoint, that makes the most sense. My biggest thing is just give us the best matches and nights and cards that you possibly can, which probably includes maybe having better wrestlers in here. And if rumors are to be true, that might be coming down the line next year. So we'll wait and see how that plays out. What's been your favorite block to date? Assuming the answer is D block, aka the correct answer. How surprised are you that it is your favorite? And I got to tell you, for me, I think it's C block. I don't think it is D block. I think C block's just had the best matches.
I like that A block feels entirely different from anything we've seen in G1 in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one way of looking at it. For me, I don't know. Maybe I like the familiarity of C block.
C block is, there's a lot of history in C block. There's a lot of history between the wrestlers in C block. So, I mean, I totally get that on paper, that's like a classic group of guys that you see wrestle each other in the G1. I have found the A block to be super interesting just in how they're approaching the matches differently, but still, putting on a good show.
If we go back to 20 men next year, which of the current lineup are in danger of being dropped?
Oh, okay.
Like eight dudes.
Yeah. Let's see. In danger, I'm just gonna run down the list and say people I think would be in danger or not available next year. So you can probably say Fale, Archer, maybe Yano, though I would be pretty surprised to see him get bounced. After this year, I'm going to leave Chase in the mix. I would say Ishii's on the bubble only because of rumors we've heard, as well as poor win-loss record for really the first time in his career. He's really going to come out under 500. From the C block, everyone probably stays. And then D, Yujiro. You probably got to put Yoshihashi on the bubble. And maybe El Phantasmo doesn't come back to the G1 right away. Maybe there's a skip year or two. So those are the guys I would put on the bubble, and then you would have some surprises that that don't participate. Maybe even someone like Kenta or Taichi, right?
Someone like that. Someone that you think the reality is that if they go to 20 men and there's 28 here, there's going to be at least one or two people that you think absolutely deserve to be in the G1 that won't be in the G1 next year is what would happen.
And that's sort of the fun of that. But it's also frustrating. I also wonder if Tama Tonga, I wonder how many more G1s he's got in him after he had left the tournament and then has now come back. So those are the types of guys that I think, but Tama Tonga is still obviously clearly very fit, very in good shape and can go. But I do wonder, if the story arc is there for him to take on another G1 next year.
Pulmonary Archery asked, any big twist predictions for the final day?
I still think somebody's going to make the semifinals that we haven't even discussed on today's podcast.
I'm thinking that on the finals, we see the emergence of someone from AEW or Ring of Honor / Ring of Honor that hasn't been to Japan. Maybe like Bryan Danielson. I'm not even saying that in conjunction to the G1 finals, but on the final night shows up in some capacity. I think maybe we see potentially him and Zach face off.
I think that's tough because of travel restrictions and visas. So, because these guys don't.
Let me have this. Let me believe.
But they don't show up for free, even for a face-off.
Right.
So they have to have everything, all the ducks in a row. And part of me feels like they're probably not bringing someone in right now just for a face-off because they have to have all the paperwork.
The video thing.
They could do
that counts too.
So the video thing would work, right?
We'll see. That dude named Menace asked, is it still too early to call the G1? And I would say, well, probably, but I got Naito winning. I think he's winning it.
It's too early to call the G1 until the G1 is over.
Yeah. I'm wondering what scenario he sees playing out.
Yeah, what? Yeah. Why?
I think it's still Naito, and I'm bought into it, and it's going to be hard to change my mind on that. In-ring art said, great to see Jonah and Tom Lawler really be over with the Japanese fans. How much time do you see them spending in Japan for the rest of the year and in 2023? And I will say, I do see that Tom Lawler is working New Japan of America dates for Strong, but I don't think that I see Jonah working the next two tapings, which might be an indication.
Yeah, I think Jonah's going to spend more time in Japan than Lawler. But that's not to say that Lawler won't get the invite back either for big shows or for another big tour or tournament. So I do think both of those guys are slated to return to Japan a couple of times over the course of the next year or so. But I think Jonah's going to be a little bit more of a force, and I think we're seeing that even in just the performance of this year's G1.
Rainbow Slam Pig said, of the new entrants to the tournament this year, who do you think is getting the best reaction from Japanese fans?
I mean, you saw the end of that match between Jonah and Okada. That's the biggest reaction we've seen in New Japan in
years,
2 or 3 years now because of the pandemic. So, I mean, that was a vocal, ignore the rules reaction. It was incredible.
Yeah, but they clap a lot for Tom Lawler when he's about to take those pants off.
Well, yeah. I mean, something about the Russian nesting shorts that really gets it going.
Based on the standings of today, as well as the upcoming schedule, who do you think the most compelling, viable semifinal and final matchups would be? Is it different than what you thought at the beginning of the tournament? And I would say, even though there have been surprises and everything, we're not that far from where I thought we'd be, just generally speaking, aside from maybe David Finlay leading D Block.
Yeah, I would not have put Finlay at the top of D Block, but I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know that my opinion has changed. I still think Jay White's gonna go undefeated through his block. I still think the most likely scenario is that Okada comes out of A, Naito comes out of C, And D, I've never had a really good feel for, and it's paying off with a big mess of a block. So,
right,
like, that has been my take all along, is that D was going to be messy and probably going to come down to the wire, and that seems to be where we're headed.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see a Naito Okada final regardless, however everything shakes out. Zach Tay6 says, of this year's G1 debuts, who has impressed you the most? So I'm guessing he's talking about like new entrants. I mean, I think it's Jonah, probably.
Yeah, Jonah has been probably the most impressive. Lawler has been really fun, cool to see, right? And clearly he's paying deference to the experience, which I think is awesome. Finley, though, I mean, like I said, if we were talking 5 days ago, Finley's the guy that would have impressed me the most, right? And Jonah just eked past him, and maybe the Finley arc is kind of over because he got to do everything he needed to do, but that's not to say that he hasn't been impressive. I mean, he's been really good in this tournament too. So
I almost didn't even say him because I forgot he's never been in one.
Right,
he's been with the company. It's like
he's been around so long, right? And then he finally gets into a G1, and he's doing what he can with it.
Paul the Saints fan says, Kevin Kelly has mentioned the possibility of playing matches on semifinal night if there are ties unbreakable by head-to-head. So does that mean three-way ties will be decided by scramble-type matches? So we already discussed this, but yeah, I mean, a scramble match is a possibility we hadn't even thought of, I guess.
I mean, if it's a seven-way tie, I think they have to do a Rambo, right?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I don't know.
If it's a seven-way tie, there's no other way to break it.
Morbid Suplex asked the last question here. Who's your favorite guest commentator throughout the G1? Tom, Lance, or ELP? And I think I'm an ELP guy.
So I liked all of them.
Right.
I think they all added some different flair. Like Tom Lawler, if he wants it, he has a future in commentary. If he doesn't want to wrestle anymore, like Tom
Lawler's great.
He was great. Great in a way that would be like a traditional analyst or commentator, right? Not great in the way of like he's just a wrestler talking about wrestler stuff. Like he brings a lot to the table with his history and his knowledge, and he was just incredible. Lance, I loved that Lance just like knew nothing about what has been happening in New Japan for the past like 3 years. He knew nothing, and Kevin Kelly was like, yeah, I'll catch you up, like let's talk about what's going on. And ELP, I mean, even though he thinks I'm a nerd, he's pretty funny, and I appreciate his candor on commentary in a way that's different from the other two. So yeah, I mean, it's been kind of neat to get the wrestlers on commentary, and I think they've all brought something different to the table.
Well, that is going to do it for our coverage of the G1. Coming up this week, we have nights 14, 15, 16, 17, and then on Tuesday, the 18th, which will be the final block night in the Nippon Budokan. 8 matches, all G1 matches, back to back to back to back to back. And we will be reviewing all 5 of those next week on Keepin It Strong Style. This past week on New Japan Strong, there was a second anniversary special episode. It was a recap show hosted by Ian Riccaboni. They just did brief recaps of the ongoings of the past year of New Japan Strong. If you haven't seen it, I would definitely say check it out. This coming week, they have High Alert Night 1. We don't know what matches are going to be on that episode. We're going to skip the news. One thing I do want to mention, just because it's relevant to my excursion match of the week recommendation. This past week, Robbie Eagles made his way over to Mexico. He was in CMLL. The International Grand Prix is coming up on August 19th. He got there early, and on Friday night, him, Ultimo Guerrero, and Gran Guerrero defeated Volador Jr., Averno, and Dragon Rojo. Eagles made Dragon Rojo tap out to the Ron Miller special. Dragon Rojo is the reigning CMLL World Middleweight Champion, and he made a challenge for that title, which will take place this coming Friday. So that's all ahead of the International Grand Prix tournament that is coming up that both Rocky Romero and Tiger Mask are making their way out there for that. We're going to kick everything from the news to next week, the other questions to next week, and then we're going to end the show here. Recommended matches of the week. So last week I recommended Boss Rutan versus Koji Kanemoto from October 26, 2002. Dave Meltzer gave this 3 1/4 at the time. This is for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title. And Chris, you checked this match out. What were your thoughts?
So I love Boss Rutan. It's like this long-standing thing that everyone's seen the YouTube video where he's like teaching people how to like be in a bar fight, right? Right. So like, I love this dude. I haven't watched a lot of Boss Rutan pro wrestler, but this was really fun. It was cool to see. I do imagine him narrating it himself because that's kind of how that video goes. So that was kind of distracting in my own brain, but 3 1/4 feels a little low from old Dave over here. I thought it was a really fun match.
It's an overcorrection.
Yeah,
it's a response to the Inokiism. He's like, they're rolling around and doing MMA 3 1/4.
Yeah. So, but I mean, it was I like that it's a junior heavyweight championship match, and I think everyone always expects something a little different from those than what these guys delivered. And I think that that's what's actually really neat about the history of the junior heavyweight title is that there is a lot of different styles within it, and it's not like the WCW cruiserweights where like it's always high flying. So, but this was fun. I appreciated it. And when you sent it to me, you're like, "Hey man, can you watch this?" I was like, "Dude, I love Boss Rutan." And you like I think you thought I was being sarcastic.
But you were being facetious.
Yeah, and I was like, "No, for real. Like, I love that. I will absolutely watch this and enjoy it." So, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is the pinnacle of Boss Rutan doing worked matches. So if you guys haven't seen it, I think it's definitely worth your while to check it out. Plus, it's only like 12 minutes. It's available on YouTube. So
it's very quick, easy watch. Yeah, and then YouTube might actually then recommend you the Boss Rutan bar fight video, which is like, I don't know how long it is, but however long it is, you're booked for that amount of time.
They make Koji look incredible too. He's just taking this incredible ass beating from Boss Rutan, and then suddenly he just rolls into a knee bar and it's over. And it's like, what? Last week, Jeremy recommended the excursion match of the week, Kushida versus Rich Swann from Impact Wrestling episode 938. This was from July 16th, 2022. Basically, what I would tell you here, it's usually what I end up saying about almost anything that airs on Impact Television as it relates to excursion match of the week. It's very good, but I wouldn't go out of my way to see it. It was probably a sub 15-minute match, and considering the two talents here, I'm sure they could probably have a really high-end caliber, top-level match. This wasn't quite that. This was sort of establishing Kushida as a force to be reckoned with within Impact, his debut, and he did defeat Rich Swann with the hoverboard. I'd probably go 3 3/4. Fun match. It's available for free on New Japan World. If you haven't seen it, maybe check it out, but it's not going to be in anything serious to consider for excursion match of the year this year. So that's going to bring us to our recommendations this week. I am recommending this upcoming Friday night's CMLL Super Viernes World Middleweight title match between Robbie Eagles and Dragon Rojo from Arena, Mexico for Jeremy to watch. And Chris, what do you got for me for recommended match of the week?
I've got my favorite match of all time, which just crossed an anniversary. So the match is Tomohiro Ishii versus Katsuyori Shibata from G1 Climax 23, Night 4, August 4th, 2013, from Osaka, Edion Arena, Osaka. Actually, I think then it was probably the Bodymaker Coliseum. Yep. Yeah. Same building that they were in this weekend, though. It is, without a doubt, my favorite match, and I don't ever call anything best because I don't need y'all telling me that it's not the best match of all time. But it is my favorite match of all time. It is like 12 minutes, and it is a sprint. Like, it is absolutely the most... the fastest moving and non-stop action. I mean, like, the cardio on these two dudes for those 12 minutes is just incredible. Like, it's a match for the ages. And honestly, like, if you have the means to watch the entire card from 8-4-13, like, it is right up there with
Greatest shows of all time.
Some of the greatest wrestling shows of all time, and it's just a G1 card. I mean, it's just night 4 of the G1, but that was when they did all block matches.
Right.
No undercard, so it's 10 block matches. You've got guys like Shelton X Benjamin and Davey Boy Smith Jr. and is Lance Archer on that card? Probably.
I'm pretty sure he is.
Yeah, and then you've got Ibushi versus Nakamura for the first time ever. Like, it's a great card, but the really standout match is Ishii versus Shibata, and this was Ishii's first G1, so he was really putting it together, and from here on out, the rest is history with that dude. So Shibata too, but I mean, you can't beat this match. It's just so much fun to watch. It's the match like when people ask me what like New Japan Wrestling is, like, this is the match that I send them, and I'm like, hey, like, this is a pretty good indication of like why I enjoy this stuff.
Yep, it's one of my favorites as well, and I'm looking forward to reviewing that for next week. That's going to do it for our coverage of this week's episode. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. We couldn't have done it without you. Give us any plugs on your way out. Let us know where we can find you and what you're doing, what you're up to.
Sure. I can't let you know everything that I'm up to because I'm lurking in the shadows. But okay. I'm up to some things. You can find me on Twitter at the Chris Samsa, and then you can find kind of my G1 hub for all my G1 work right now is sportofprowrestling.com. So you'll find the notes that I send the broadcast team and updated blocks and box scores and statistics around this year's G1 as well as historical G1s at sportofprowrestling.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next week, Jeremy Donovan will be returning to broadcast action, joining me to discuss G1 Climax 32 nights 14 through 18, and we will be joined by Karen Peterson. If you've enjoyed today's show, please consider making a donation. Visit socialsuplex.com/donate. Click on the donate button under the Keepin' It Strong Style logo. Make sure to connect with us on social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Reddit. You can email Jeremy at socialsuplex.com. Check out all the other shows on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. One Nation Radio, hosted by Rich Latta and James Boyd. The Grave Consequences podcast with Caleb and Maserati, All Things Elite with Floyd and Austin, AEW Match Guide podcast hosted by Sir Sam, and The Great Match Generator hosted by Danny. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating and review. We'll catch you next week on Keepin' It Strong Style, the ace of podcasts.
Ichiban.
Thank you for listening to Keepin' It Strong Style. We'll see you next time.
You could save big when you bundle your home and auto with Progressive, but when we just come out and say it, it feels like it falls a bit flat. So we're going to use humor. But we don't want to insult your intelligence, so nothing too goofy. And we need to avoid any polarizing topics. Oh, and it has to be about how you can save big when you bundle your home and auto with Progressive. You know what? Maybe humor is a bad idea. Yeah, it's never going to work. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Discount not available in all states or situations.